Yeah, productivity can be toxic, and actually didn't know that that was even a thing. But then I did realize that sometimes when you're overworking or working hard does not mean that you're getting things done or you're making any progress. Like Aggie said, the hustler culture, everybody, we now have a culture where you must keep working. You should always be working like a donkey, you know. You should never have a moment of rest. When you rest, they say that, oh, you're being weak, or you're being lazy, or you're being idle, what the case, or whatever the situation may be.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that you're getting things done. And the thing about toxic productivity, it can lead to negative feelings about your self-worth and about yourself in general, because you're going to be focusing on the things you haven't done as opposed to building onto the things that you have already done. Did you understand?
Kwanza, they are insisting they want to be president and lead the country. They are not saying we want to lead the country so that we make ABC for the country. The leadership of Azimio doesn't say this is what we want to do for the country, except the difference is that the Azimio leadership has previously shown that they have fought for public interest, and that is the only affection they may have with those who support public interest. Otherwise, our political parties are vehicles for individuals to get to leadership, and that's why when they join coalitions, they are pursuing that personal interest, as she's saying. And once the personal interest is either achieved or not achieved, the next thing is we're going to renegotiate. I wouldn't be surprised that even these independents who are being elected will be voting alongside the sides of the political coalitions they wish to support in terms of the leadership of that political coalition. Or even these political, whoever wins, will be buying the independents or buying MPs from the other side, because we have seen them being bought all along. And that is the issue that leads me to the question of corruption in parliament. We have seen our parliament being accused of being bought to vote one way or another, depending on what the leadership of either a particular bill or a particular interest want. Accusations have been made. I'm sure you remember people being, members of parliament accusing each other of being corrupted with either 10,000 or 50,000 shillings in the bathrooms of parliament, and or being met by certain leadership coalitions, not coalitions, leaderships of parties prior or the night before the voting on a particular bill. So, whereas I'm optimistic about the balance, I am also cautious and plentifully cautious about the levels of corruption in this country and how they might be bought one way or another in terms of voting within parliament.
But they hold together for us. And if we take, for example, in 2002, when we had the National Rainbow Coalition, it held together until we were coming into the next election in 2007. And so it holds together because when they all come together, they're actually going in to implement a certain manifesto. And we saw in 2002 the introduction of the CDF and just how well it was working, until we start coming into the next election where the politicians' interests now say, like, I want to steer this ship. And you have various politicians within that coalition now wanting to be the head of the ship. And so that's what begins to make that fall apart.
Danvas, I wanted to look at this in terms of comparing the heavy manifestos that these political coalitions gave Kenyans before the Kenyans went to the ballot, vis-a-vis their likelihood of holding together, like what Cynthia is saying. What are we likely to lose or gain if you compare?
You see, back to what I said, you see, a manifesto is like a house, okay? The challenge we have with all manifestos from both sides is the foundation which they stand on, okay? Which I say that is the ideology. What's your conviction? What's your worldview? Because that determines your manifesto. It should rather ideally determine. For example, let me give you examples to answer your question. You see, using an American example, excuse me, if I'm a conservative or Republican, they believe in small governance, less taxes. So you know, for example, that if a Republican comes, he's going to say, hey, less taxes, okay, small government. Okay, if a Democrat's going to come, he's like, well, we need more social programs. So you already know where they're coming from. The challenge we have with the manifestos, they're not really rooted and grounded on a firm or a specific ideology. You understand? They are expedient, is what people really want to hear. And if you quite frankly look at and examine them in a nutshell, what are they saying? They're pretty much closely saying the same thing. There's not really much difference in terms of ideology. All promising all these things they will do. Well, the challenge you have with that, if you understand even the budget cycle, is the fact that whoever comes to power now is bound by the budget that's already passed by the previous government. So there's not much you can do in terms of your manifesto. Your 100 days promises ain't going to work simply because the budget's already set and it's actually rolling. You will do your budget next year, in July.
Supplementary budget.
Yeah, and maybe supplementary budget. Yeah, you can do S1, S2, S3. But even that, if you look at supplementary budget, there's still an extent regional budget. You don't really deviate much from that. So there's not so much you can do. Even the first S1 will come maybe November earliest, given how the House is divided. It's going to be probably January before you do the S1 you call S1 in budgeting. So 100 days will be passed before you do anything to begin with, because you're bound by law. There's nothing you can do but abide by what has been approved by Parliament. Appropriated by Parliament.
But they knew this as they were making those promises.
100-day march.
Well, so that's a trying to answer your question. Because there's governance. You see, politics is what they say, politics about pros. I mean, governance is a different animal altogether. The reality in governance, if you've been there, I am there, is radically different. So what I'm hearing both of them say, I'm like, guys, do you know the reality of governance? So people will be disappointed. Reality. Which now leads to what I'm saying earlier. Eventually, the challenging of holding those manifestos and promises would materialize, because now, especially now that the fact that this House is pretty much divided, when it comes to appropriation, whichever person becomes to be the president of a country, they have a divided House, okay? Chances of you pushing all your agendas in this House are pretty much slim, because the other guys will be like, no. It will be very, very slim, unless you're very good in your PR skills and managing people. So for me, you look at the next cycle, it will be a challenge to pull your election, because the first year, you rarely do most things you promise because budget has been set. Now, the second year is when you start. Now, the House is divided. Now, if these coalitions hold the way they are, it will be hard for you to get everything. You may get half of what you promised. Now, come in the next election cycle, what will you say? Well, I promised this. Well, I didn't deliver because of X, Y, and Z, but you promised. So now, back to what she said, the reality is seen in the next election cycle, whereby because you didn't deliver, people with disenfranchised, as Trevor, as you said earlier, voters are not really happy. And the turnover, of course, we've seen is almost 80% previous House. I mean, it's the highest turnover actually we've seen. A lot of people have been swept out because of the same thing. So I would say this, but to the politicians, to Kenyans, let's be realistic to an extent, okay? Let's be realistic to an extent. Let's be very realistic to Kenyans. Let's promise actually what can be delivered. I like a politician who can say, I'll do 2 things, and that's about it, rather than 50 things, because the manifestos are like 50 things, which majority of them are going to, I'll do only 2 things, and that's it. If I don't do, I can go home.
Yeah, but Cynthia, the thing is, you've been in the trenches as a politician. The key is to sell hope. If you are that honest to the electorate, would they even listen to you?
Absolutely. One of the things that Council pointed out was that we are looking at the characters and the people who are selling hope and all the marketers within that coalition. I'll call them, of course, they're the politicians, but they're the marketers. They're basically marketing that manifesto. One of the things he pointed out is what is the character of these people? We looked at one coalition, the Azmir coalition, has characters who have always had the public at heart and have been basically human rights defenders, advocates, and who we know they do what they say and they mean what they do. When they were given responsibilities in previous regimes and governments, we saw their actions and inactions. And therefore, we know that when they say they're going to do that, they're standing on these ideologies from their parties, that they are social democrats, that they are going to be looking at all these social welfare things that they have put in their manifesto. A lot of the things in the manifesto is going directly to service these people. We have seen, for example, let me give this example. When His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga was the Minister for Roads, we saw what he was able to do. I mean, he didn't, of course, with public participation, but if he needed to pass the road through some suburb that had all these plush houses, we saw these houses coming down because the road had to be done. And this is the radical surgery that Kenya needs. And we know that the people who are speaking, they're not speaking from both sides of their mouth, that these people, once they have said this, they're going to do it. Whereas in another coalition, you're looking at the character of the person. Why aren't they talking, why aren't they crusading against what is really ailing Kenya? Because a lot of the things that people have said, especially when there was a previous process and the whole country airing their views, which was the Building Bridges initiatives. I hate to bring it up now, but okay, not hate, but I had to bring it up because that's where really Kenyans... And corruption was a major issue. And when you see one of the people, one side of the coalition not bringing this up, not speaking to it, not saying how they're going to handle it, then you'll be a little bit skeptical about how they're going to deliver. And therefore, that's where now the 100 days delivery will be a challenge for them, because what you say and what you do are two different things. Okay. And so you're able to see that.
We'll get into the Chapter 6 leadership and integrity part, but let's see what Harun Ndubi has to say about these issues of promises being made by politicians and the expectations of the electorate in terms of the manifesto.
Actually, I keep wondering what, or even why they make the promises. Because the biggest promise Kenya has, and that is the basis of the hope of the country, is the Constitution. If you upheld the Constitution and enacted laws that followed the Constitution and did everything in accordance with the law, that will help us deliver. Because what we need in terms of the selling of that hope idea, what we need really is an environment where human dignity, equality, and the equality of opportunity is available to everyone. Once that is done, people will be able to invest in themselves and do and achieve their dreams. But when a politician promises that we are going to give you money, what is that? What they have not said anything much about infrastructure or in health. Okay, Azimio's leader said there will be something called Babacare. He has not unpacked it. I have not understood what it means in terms of the reality of it. But saying, I will give you cash. The Kenya Kwanza leader has said, I'm going to give you this many billions. On what basis? And I like what he says. The budget is already done. So where are you going to get these billions from? You are going to tax people. And it's not saying this is how I will tax the richer and probably tax less the poorer, so that there is some level of equity in terms of taxation, so that those who are poor can make savings and improve their lives. Those who are too rich can sacrifice something so that the poorer will benefit. So the political promises are basically trash. If you asked me,
I wouldn't trash them.
Let him finish.
Forgive my language.
Let him finish.
I listen patiently when you're speaking, so perhaps learn to be that patient with me. The only promise that I would trust that can happen is a promise based on how people will respect the law, how we can stop extrajudicial killings, how we will improve the welfare of our security infrastructure and all that. But other things about giving people money and putting money into people's pockets, that is a lie. That's what I'm calling trash. Because there is no government that is going to bring money and give it to you for free.
Yeah. Harun, you've raised very fundamental issues there, but I'm just wondering, Danvers, to what extent is the electorate empowered to interrogate these manifestos to that extent and to ask those further questions beyond just what is being presented?
And the question, if they have read the manifestos,
Yes.
I've never seen one myself.
Yeah.
Are the cash transfers to the elderly that are being implemented right now all trash? And how is it being paid back? You know, if it's being done at a minimum to the elderly, to a certain scale in the population, if it is now escalated to the vulnerable families, how would you trash that? If I came in and said there'll be no... I remember being in the county assemblies that the devolution ministry said no more benchmarking abroad. And those are savings. If then the leader comes in and says no more excesses of government in certain areas, it doesn't necessarily have to be in taxation, but just looking at how we can make savings in other operations within government so that this money that has been saved is actually put to finance this program that we have, I think it is doable.
So
And
there's value in some...
Yes, it's being done at a minimal. It can be escalated.
Yeah. But who's asking the how, the pertinent questions about how sustainable and how practical this is? I believe that is what Harun is raising. Because yes, these promises come, they're big and they're enticing. And sometimes they can generate that much needed energy from the electorate. But who is asking how it's going to be implemented? Ali, we're just talking about the magic of 100 days, and Danvers is breaking down how it's impractical as we speak. Who is going deeper?
You see, first of all, to your first question and about the people being empowered, quite frankly, for the most part, the Kenyan population, I now that the Premier League is on, I don't watch it myself, but the people who really love it, Kenyans and politicians like the Premier League, they are so emotionally vested in these politicians on both sides. I mean, they're emotionally vested. Now, if you had to ask one of the players in the Premier League whether they know any Kenyan by name, apart from the president, they don't know, and probably they don't care. You understand? But Kenya is so vested emotionally. But how does a team winning or losing affect your life? Not really much, unless you did bet or put money into it. And that's a challenge we have with the Kenyan population in terms of politics. It's an emotional investment. Okay, it's not intellectual. Because if it's intellectual, then you'll ask the hard questions. The how? If you're really serious about it. It's emotional. I love this guy. Okay? Why? I just like him. That's what, so there's really no good reason. Or previously, because I belonged to a specific ethnic group, therefore because my leader is in that side, therefore I will support him. Whether that person is good for you or not is immaterial. You will just support him. That's a challenge we have. Now, for me, what you're doing here, because Kenyans are listening, is what we need. We are moving the needle and moving the conversation to really to ask. Kenyans need to ask the hard questions. Not civil society. That's not the work of civil society. Because civil society do not vote for politicians. The Kenyans who vote for. Because unfortunately, civil society has now come to the issue of accountability. Trevor and I have been to CMD. That's why we really, grill these guys. That's not the work of civil society. It should be the work of the voters. Rather than go to rallies, it should be the other way. Not that politicians speak. Rallies should be the other way around, where voters ask hard questions as to exactly what is asking, the how, nitty-gritty, because then it will be a sober-up expectation. I think to your last bit, here is the reality we face, and I feel for our country. There's a certain reality. There's an economic reality. If you look at the fiscal policy that is already in place, the monetary policy that is already in place, they construe the next administration pretty much. The only thing they can adjust is the fiscal policy, because that's where governance comes. The monetary policy is set by the central bank. You know what really you can do. Our ceiling is facing headwinds. Inflation is high. Kenyans are facing reality of high inflation, for example. Now, it is not about to go anytime soon, okay? And that's the reality that now when it comes to governance, Kenyans need to face. And I generally feel for whoever comes to power, because they will really have a hard time stealing this ship we call Kenya, that we love very much. Because we are facing headwinds, we're facing challenges, and at the end of the day, whichever side that you can say that you're supporting, they will have that reality. We need to, as a country, still move forward on terms of these issues that we are discussing. in the next 5 years will be determinant of even how we move as a country forward, because for the first time we really have a balanced house. If you are, to me, I don't call it a divided house. I call it a balanced house. I'm more pragmatic in my approach. It's a balancing act. If you're in governance, one of the most important things you can have and soften is counter checks. Okay, Wakili just said right now, we just said implementation of law is so critical. If we operationalize the institution, our constitution rather, will be so far as a country. So for me, the checks and balances are so critical in governance, because when you have a runaway side of government, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the parliament, whether it's the executive, then we have problems that we have. So for me, I look forward that the next 5 years will be to me a very critical for our country. Not, right now we're looking at the presidency and the election. For me, I look at the governance aspect of it and how we go as a country. If they can steal the ship, it can bring sound fiscal policy to stabilize our country, then we have a chance now to move forward and to take off. Because this country has a potential, guys. I think we have the potential to be one of the greatest countries in Africa. And this is the time about we have to say it. The greatest resource we have in our country is not gold, is not oil, is the people of Kenya. We are the greatest resource. Compared to anywhere in Africa, we're the smartest people, I believe, and we can go further if we harness that potential that we have.
And what Danvas is raising, Harun, brings me to my next conversation. Appointments after polls, because he says we have the greatest potential here. But we've seen this several times whereby the political losers are the ones given plum positions as a political reward for having championed the agenda of the ruling coalition at that point. Should that be done away with, so that it is clear that if the electorate rejected you, then there's no way you should be given an appointment which is essentially going to serve the same electorate that rejected you to begin with?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I will take it further a little, but let me say this about the politicians who have lost elections. Already, we have seen politicians promise others political jobs. Of course, we know that every political leadership has to have people it trusts in certain essential or in political support areas. But in terms of technical people, technicians, that should be left to the Public Service Commission to appoint the most competent persons. However, there is another element about those appointments that is quite disappointing in this country. If you look at the appointment of people to the judiciary, for instance, you will find that you are told, not just the judiciary, but other places, including commissions, where you are asked to get a certificate of good conduct from the police, get a certificate of clearance certificate from KRA, get a certificate from the HELB, and such others. Now, the question, and CRBs, if you have been listed, and ESCC as well. That is an exclusionary condition that is given perhaps to people who are competent but may be owing debts. And the debts are debts. They are payable, and you cannot be denied a job, or you shouldn't be denied a job because you have a debt. Two, if you have tried to do anything in this country, or anywhere else in the world, there is a possibility that you have made a mistake. If you do nothing, you will have a very clean bill of health, and then you get a job for which you are not competent. But I'm saying that regarding technical jobs. But for political appointments, I think every leader is entitled to have people they trust. If you have people you don't trust or you distrust and you expect them to work with you to achieve your vision, if you have any, and I don't know whether we have leaders politicians who have visions other than what she called interest, which I'm calling personal interest. I'm not sure whether they are there, but assuming they have a vision, or even based on those promises they make, even if they are false promises, or those that they can achieve, even if there are too many, but they can only achieve just a few, then you would expect that they should have people they may trust. However, the Constitution laid out clearly that cabinet secretaries should not be politicians or should not be members of parliament. But we have seen in the previous regime, the outgoing regime did at some point, I think in the second term, they appointed losing politicians into cabinet. And the question therefore was, are we descending, coming down, lowering the expectations or the high standards the Constitution set? And I would say the answer to that question is yes, because that's what even the promoters of the failed BBI were doing. Because they themselves said, we now want some members of cabinet to come from parliament so that they can account to the people. I don't know what logic they are using about that, about accountability to the people, because you account to the people by doing what is lawful in accordance with the law. There is nothing else you need to do to account. You account to the people also by giving reports to parliament and promoting public participation so that people can get to know. And like my colleague here is saying, let the people be the ones to asking you questions rather than you talking at them. But unfortunately, what we see in our politics is politicians seeking to talk at us. And they say, if we have appointed Harun Dubi from your constituency, therefore your interests are taken care of. And that's why I feel fairly sad when you find people saying, oh, because our man from Kitui is going to be the prime minister is good, or our son from Nyamira is the cabinet secretary for interior, so we are taken care of. And yet when Matiang'i or Charity Ngilu or whoever else earns their salary, they don't distribute it to you. In fact, talking about salaries now, that reminds me again about Parliament and its arrogation of the power to itself to improve their own salaries and change the law about their own salaries and benefits and emoluments, which is itself a reverse of the question of accountability and holding public interest. And if you ask any of those individuals, they will tell you, oh, you know, when you people die, you all come to us. I mean, the relatives come to us for fundraisings. When you are sick, we do. But when you are sick, it's your insurance which will take care of it. Those who don't have insurance in the village, it is us villagers, like our sister here, who will come to contribute. The MPs and others will not come. So that's why I think that we need to have politicians who are focusing on the greater public good rather than saying we are going to improve our salaries so that we can take care of our interests.
Yeah, Cynthia, should this culture then be broken? Because some of these appointments are even done before the election. We've seen, even during the campaigns, they would line up the CS and say, this is proposed for this ministry, this is proposed. Is it even fair?
We need to appreciate that the school of politicians that we are, the crop, not the school, the crop of politicians that we have, all went through the professor of politics, the late President Moi, where we saw regions that did not favor him. He actually brought up an individual who would represent that region. And basically, that's what we are seeing now. First and foremost, let me begin by commending the leaders who come from Central region or the Mount Kenya region who have been aligned to Azimio. Because the purpose of leadership, as Trevor alluded, is to sell hope and to give people direction. And basically, what the Central region or Mount Kenya region, their fears of not being Azimionated, Azimio aligned, was because of an argument that had been sold to them for the longest time, that the leadership on the other side is led by a madman, a man who believes in witchcraft, and all these are allegations that have been in the psyche of the people who have been raised with this psyche, who have this fear. And therefore, it was the leadership who now had the responsibility of going back and demystifying that, saying all this was campaign. How then would you call a person mad if this is a person who has taken it on himself to deny himself so that at whatever cost, he sees that changes are made. We made changes to the Constitution. We're able to bring in the Constitution. And the beneficiaries of that same Constitution that we passed in 2010 are the people now who begin to rule. And they rule and say, let's do this. 10 years you will rule, and the next 10 years we will rule. So the foundation of one side is 10 for me, 10 for you. And the foundation of the other side is let's bring the entire country together. So you find that one coalition does not have patronage in an area like in the Mount Kenya region. Like, for example, Azmio. Most of the people who ran on an Azmio ticket, or Jubilee, for example, in Mount Kenya, have all lost their seats. What is Azmio supposed to do with Mount Kenya? Because now they believe in one Kenya. Do you leave out this whole region? Because we will only now work with the people who have been elected. The remedy is to appoint political appointments from these regions, people who were there, who fought for you, who stood by you, and they were selling this ideology. And what was the ideology? They are social democrats.
So is that for the people or for the selfish interest?
It is for the people, because these people are tried and tested. Because just like in a family, I can only bring this example to a family level. The more empowered or educated the family is, and the family members and everybody is employed in this family, the easier the family will live. I mean, if you have both husband and wife working, they're able to take care of the family needs. And in that example, so too in a community, it does transcend. And he's given the example, us local leaders are the ones who go for the Harambee. So too do the politicians. We saw when Jubilee, I just can't move from this example, Jubilee took on the reins of power, and one principal actually now made appointments for the entire country, and the deputy president actually made appointments from his region, basically from Rift Valley. These people, if I'm appointed a permanent secretary or a director in a parastatal, it's just not for me. Yes, it is for me, but I am called into these Harambes. I do have other employment opportunities that I'm going to bring in people from my country. And so it's coming from Kenya's history and learning from the professor of politics. This is the way things were done. Of course, the Constitution has cured this by giving us devolution, and that resources have been devolved down to the country. And we don't all have to go and line up at State House and grovel at the feet of the president to get a road or to get electricity or to get water. But the Constitution has answered this. But still, in the political sphere, that appointment actually affects that region, because you will be beneficiaries in ways that you probably do not know.
But Cynthia, if the people wanted that person to represent their interests, they would have
voted for that person.
Yeah, they would have elected that person. But Danvas, your thoughts on this also?
I thought the official campaign period is over.
No, pardon,
I be seeing sanctioners. His campaigning is still going on here.
We're in the season until they announce.
We are borrowing lessons.
So, but that's just it. But I think for me, see, there's a reality. I like being very real with the kind of issues. When you get there, you have to balance a lot of interest. I get your point, question, Trevor, and to answer Safin's, respond to Safin, let's be real here. You have to balance a lot of interest, okay, and expectations too. There are people who are on your side, who are your key allies, who've lost an election, okay, for one reason or the other. They have lost an election, either the primaries or the final election. These are people who also, because they supported you, brought a number of votes to you, or are influential one way or another. Okay, so as much as they lost, but they still were significant to your campaign, whichever house or movement it is. And the promises that actually are made also. There are people who, to balance the equation during the primaries, for example, people are told, okay, you step down, you give this, but you get something. Okay, those promises still have to be kept to an extent. So it's a reality of governance and politics, for that matter, that these positions will have to go to certain people. Now, whether they're lost or not, that's another question. For me, what I would advocate is whatever positions go to whoever they get, is they're qualified people. So to me, I don't look whether they lost an election or not. The question is are they right, are they fit for the job? Because we have to think about the country first. Okay, so patronage is there, but you know we have political appointments. I appreciate political appointments, but you can appoint somebody who's right for that political appointment, who actually fits that role, the political appointment, who's qualified to do that job, who's competent to do that job, not just for the sake of reward, but for the sake of the country. So for me, what I can advocate for the government that is coming, think the country first. So even as you reward and as you fill those board positions and this and that and other positions and key positions in government, put the country first. Give people who have a track record. Give people who actually can deliver. And still balance your political side, because it's a reality that they have to. They don't have much choice, because then if you don't, then you're going to have problems later. So to me, interest, yes, political interest, but for the country, put people that actually can govern, can actually deliver results for the country. Now, if you do that, the governance or the administration that are in place have a high chance of winning back, because now you have key people who deliver, especially on the technical side, the technocrats, the bureaucrats. If you get the right people, let me tell you, we saw with Kibaki, I mean, you can transform our country, you can lay foundations for a country that will transform our country.
Yeah. All right.
I hear what he's saying,
yeah,
but that is how corruption works. Because you get people to certain area appointments, call them cabinet secretaries, because you trust them and they're your friends and they're your supporters. When they engage in corruption within the ministries, you are unable to sanction them, because that's why we have seen not many ministers, except those who have fallen out of favor, have been charged in court. Those others who have continued to promote corruption but are in favor of the political establishment hardly get sanctioned at all.
Okay, we'll come back and talk about Chapter 6 of the Constitution, Leadership and Integrity. But for now, let's take a quick break here on Kenya's Choice 2022. We're keeping a pulse on what's happening at the Bomas of Kenya. We'll cross over there to Francis Gashuri to give you an update. IBC has until tomorrow. They're cutting it very close. There are indications that there might be an announcement today, but it's not been confirmed by them, because the latest they can do it anyway is tomorrow.
Is tomorrow. So far, the forms they've received online, Form 34B stand at 286 out of 291. In terms of Form 34As, they've received 46,201 out of 46,229.
Yes, we'll find out from Gashuri whether all the returning officers are there and how many they've tallied and confirmed so far right after this break. And Mwana will also be joining us in a bit.
New State South Ultra Concentrate is my mom's choice. 1, it is 4 times more concentrated. 2, it's ready to use, no need to dilute. 3, it's packed with 4 times more fragrance. And it smells so good. 4, one bottle gives you 40 washes. That's 4 times more washes. New State South Ultra Concentrate is 4 times more concentrated. For 4 times more washes and for 4 times more fragrance.
Nyosha shilingi zaidi na zaidi. Sasa unapata ofa juu ya ofa ya kuwa 100% data bonus leo. Alafu piga star 544 hash au tembelea My Safaricom app kununua bundle na kupata target yako. Safaricom is for you.
Hamjambo wa Kenya, jina langu ni Vanessa Gwandaru. Ukitaka wimbo huu kama sikiza tune yako, bonyeza star 811 star 344 hash. Kumbuka, sikiza na Citizen ni nyumbani kwa wasanii wote.
All right, thank you for staying with Kenya's Choice 2022. This is the world coverage right here on Citizen TV, na kwa sasa Mwanahamisi Hamadi anaungana nasi katika mchakato wa mawasiliano. Siko vibaya sana Mwanahamisi. Najaribu, naweza omba maji hapa na pale.
Unaambiwa kila kitu kinakuja na sababu yake. Pengine uchaguzi huu umekuja ili na wewe uweze kufanya Kiswahili
kidogo.
Kwa siku zijazo na wewe uje ufanye taarifa za Kiswahili.
Hapana, hapo hatuwezi kabisa. Lakini mambo vipi?
Nashukuru sana. Na hongereni kwa kazi nzuri ambayo mmeianza kuanzia saa 1 mpaka sasa
Sasa ushapata, tumekula ng'ombe, imebaki mkia tu, lakini
bado mko katikati, mko kwenye kifua sasa.
Kwenda wapi sasa?
Cynthia amefanya nini?
Naam?
Ulikuwa unasema Cynthia amefanya nini?
Cynthia,
Kiswahili sasa.
Nasema kwamba nitataka kuzungumza na wewe, kwa hivyo nataka nijue kwamba Kiswahili chako angalau kinaweza kuwasiliana na mtazamaji ambaye anatusikiza.
Mtazamaji ataelewa.
Hiyo ndio muhimu. Sawa, mtazamaji, hujambo popote ulipo. Ni wakati ambapo hivi sasa na mimi nimeingia ndani ya studio ili kuhakikisha kwamba wewe ambaye unatutizama hapo ulipo na ungependa pengine kupata yanayojiri kwa lugha ya Kiswahili hupitwi na lolote. Jina langu ni Mwanahamisi Hamadi na naarifiwa moja kwa moja tunakwenda katika ukumbi wa Bomas ambako tunaungana sasa na mwanahabari wetu Francis Gashuri ili aweze kutueleza ni yapi ambayo yanajiri. Manake kizingatiwa kwamba kuanzia asubuhi hatujapata kujua ni kipi ambacho kinaendelea. Gashuri, umeingia hapo Bomas majira ya saa ngapi, na kufikia sasa pengine orodha ambayo imetolewa imefika ngapi?
Mwanahamisi, good morning. Habari za asubuhi kutoka Bomas, na vile Trevor na Safin. Nimengojea Safin azungumza Kiswahili kama vile Trevor amejaribu, lakini bado hajasema, lakini nangoja tu. Ni kama ulivyosema, tuko katika ukumbi wa Bomas. Sisi ni watu wa mapema. Wanasema mapema ndio salama. So tumefika mapema, tumekuwa hapa tangu asubuhi mapema, na shughuli hapa katika ukumbi wa Bomas zinafikia ukingoni. Ukitazama pale katikati ambapo palikuwa ni ulingo wa shughuli nyingi sana hapo jana na kutoka siku ya Jumatano, sasa unaona pametulia. Shughuli zote pale katikati zimekamilika. Ule ukaguzi wa fomu 34B na fomu 34A, shughuli hiyo imekamilika, na maeneo bunge yote 290 pamoja na lile la ugaibuni yani diaspora, stakabadhi zake zimeshawasilishwa pale katika ukumbi, zikakaguliwa na mawakala wa wagombea mbalimbali pamoja na maafisa wa IEBC na vile wale ambao walikuwa wamefika hapa kufanya shughuli ya kutazama ama kuchunguza ama kufuatilia yote ambayo yalikuwa yanafanyika. Na naweza kuelezea watazamaji wetu kwamba shughuli hiyo sasa imekamilika, na linalosubiriwa sasa ni yale maeneo bunge ambayo matangazo yake matokeo yake hayakuwa yametangazwa katika ukumbi huu wa Bomas. Makamishna wa IEBC wafike pale waweze kuyatangaza. Kufikia sasa maeneo bunge 259 matokeo yake yameshatangazwa hapa katika ukumbi wa Bomas. Hivyo basi yale ambayo yamesalia ni machache sana, tuseme 32 hivi ndio yaliyosalia ili shughuli hii yote ya kinyang'anyiro cha urais mwaka 2022 ikamilike. Hivyo basi tunavyozungumza nawe Mwanahamisi ni kwamba tunasubiri tu makamishna wa IEBC wafike hapa ili watupe matokeo kutoka maeneo bunge hayo 32, alafu shughuli hiyo yote itakuwa imekamilika, na nafasi iwe pia ya mwenyekiti wa IEBC kuweza kuandaa ile form 34 cha form 34C inayo nakili matokeo yote ya kinyang'anyiro cha urais, na hatimaye aweze kumtangaza mshindi na kumpokeza form 34D ambayo ndio cheti ama ndicho cheti cha aliyeshinda katika kinyang'anyiro hiki cha urais mwaka 2022. Hivyo basi unaweza kusema bila wasiwasi wowote kwamba leo ndio leo, na kwa sababu yale maeneo bunge ambayo ni mengi yameshatangazwa, yaliyosalia ni machache. Kwa hivyo la muhimu sasa ni kusubiri tu makamishna wafike hapa ili waweze kutueleza mbivu na mbichi kuhusiana na kinyang'anyiro hiki cha urais. Yaliyosalia ni machache, 32. Hivyo basi nilisikia Trevor akisema tumemla ng'ombe mzima, sasa imesalia mkia, na hapo ndipo tupo. Mkia ni maeneo bunge hayo 32 pamoja na kumtangaza mshindi katika kinyang'anyiro hiki cha urais. Hivyo basi ni kusubiri tu. Unaona hali ni ya utulivu, ile mihemko na cheche za siasa ambazo zilishamiri siku za hapo awali kutoka jana hazijakuwemo. Ni kumaanisha kwamba sasa watu ambao walikuwa wamefika hapa, ikiwemo mawakala, wanasiasa mbalimbali kutoka mirengo yote miwili ya Kenya Kwanza na Azimio, wamesha kubaliana kwamba hali ndio hii, matokeo ndio haya. Cha muhimu ni kusubiri yale ambayo mwenyekiti wa IEBC Wafula Chebukati atakuwa anayasema. Na vile vile Mwanahamisi, ukiwauliza wote, kila mtu anasema ako mbele, kila mtu anasema hesabu zake ziko salama, lakini msema kweli ni IEBC na mwenyekiti wake Wafula Chebukati kutuambia kati ya wagombea 4 waliokuwa kwenye kinyang'anyiro ni yupi aliyeibuka mshindi. Tayari Mwaure Wahiga ameshasema amesalimu amri na akakubali matokeo. Hivyo basi watatu, Raila Odinga, William Ruto, Profesa George Wajakoya, hawa watatu ndio bado wako kwenye kinyang'anyiro. Hao ndio wanaosubiri kuelezwa kwa kina na IEBC matokeo yako vipi, ili tuweze kujua mrithi wa Rais Uhuru Kenyatta ni nani.
Naam, asante sana Gashuri. Hapo mwanahabari wetu Francis Gashuri akitueleza kwamba tunachosubiri ni kama matokeo tu ya maeneo bunge 32 tu. Nina mengine ambayo nataka kuzungumza, lakini kwanza nimpe Trevor kabla Gashuri aondoke, manake ni kama anataka kumuuliza kidogo kitu hapo.
Gashuri, it's good to see you this morning at the Bomas of Kenya. Do we know now when is most likely the announcement is going to be made? Is there an indication that the declaration of the president-elect will be made today? At what time? We've also seen some relative calm there following some chaotic scenes yesterday there. Does that mean that somehow everyone is in agreement with the pronouncements being made by the IEBC after confirmation?
Trevor, I mean, it's almost a done deal. 259 constituency results so far verified, validated and declared here at the Bomas of Kenya. What remains is just about 32 constituencies. Basically tells you that this process is done and dusted. Barring any serious situation, we should be able to have the final declaration maybe in another 1 hour or 2 hours time. Put it this way, maybe latest at about noon or 1 o'clock, we should be able to know with certainty who is President Uhuru Kenyatta's successor in the presidential election that was conducted on Tuesday. Taking into account that also time is running out, tomorrow is the final day that the declaration can be made. But be it as it may, you remember the IEBC commissioners had said they will not exhaust all the 7 days that they have constitutionally to conclude the process of verifying and validating as well as declaring the presidential results. They still have 1 day to spare. So this process looks almost a done deal. So maybe in another 1 hour or 2 hours time maximum, we should be able to have the final declaration and the answer to who is President Uhuru Kenyatta's successor. 32 constituencies is way less. And in any case, Trevor, those 32 constituency results have already been verified and validated. All that we are waiting for is for the commissioners to come and declare those results publicly and tell Kenyans how those constituencies voted. And after that, just the process of now processing the Form 34C that gives us a tabulation of all the presidential election results from the 290 constituencies plus the diaspora constituency, as well as the 46,229 polling stations across the country. That is the tabulation that will be contained in Form 34C. And eventually, prepare the Form 34D, which is basically the certificate that is awarded to the person who is declared winner in the presidential election. So what remains is way less than what has happened in the last 5-6 days, Trevor.
Yeah, Gashuri, are you getting a sense that the agents are in agreement with the numbers being read out? Because yesterday there was a bit of push and pull in terms of who has what and propaganda going around. Are the agents in agreement with the confirmed documents that have been there? Because the floor has now been cleared, meaning work is done.
Trevor, they have no option. Remember, what basically happens here at the Bomas of Kenya is just the process of verifying and validating the results as they come from the constituencies and from the polling centers. Remember, you cannot make any changes here at the Bomas of Kenya. The forms that are coming from the polling stations, the 46,229 of them, all you can do is to take note of the errors and the discrepancies that may arise, because the results will be declared, were already announced at the poll. So not that the agents have so much leeway insofar as agreeing or disagreeing with the results is concerned, insofar as whether they can also be able to stop the process from going on and declaration being made, insofar as who has won the presidential election. So they have no option. What actually happens here is just the process of verifying and validating and eventually collating all those results to come up with one final figure that will be declared for the presidential election results. So anyone who will be dissatisfied will have 7 days from the date of the declaration of results, which presumably is today, maybe up to Monday next week, to file a petition at the Supreme Court, and then thereafter the Supreme Court will have 14 days to hear and determine that petition if it will be filed. So basically, it's all a wait and see game, because the agents have already witnessed what was happening. They had their people at the center of the auditorium. They were able to go through the process of verification and validation. So all they have to do is now to append their signatures to the final document so that it can be handed over to the winner, and eventually anyone dissatisfied has the legal course to take.
Yeah, Gashuri, has the IBC been able to explain the discrepancies on their online portal? Because on the Form 34Bs, only 286 have been uploaded out of the 291, meaning they still have about 5 more to go. But it seems the returning officers are already there. How come they were unable to upload their forms? And the same thing applies for the polling stations. Only 46,201 have been uploaded according to their portal out of the 46,229. So there's still 28 pending. But it seems the physical document is there. They've just not been uploaded. Have they been able to explain that discrepancy?
Trevor, you remember when IBC was preparing for this election, they told us there were 1,111 polling stations that were not covered by a 3G network. And so that, I would assume, is the reason why some of those polling stations, their results are not yet in the portal. But it is important to affirm at this point that all the results have been brought here at the Bomas of Kenya. They have been verified, they have been validated. So that is the situation as it were. But maybe the IEBC commissioners will have to give us an explanation as to why maybe some of those forms have not been uploaded and what they were using to do the verification and the validation right here at the Bomas of Kenya. Because what was happening was basically looking at what has been brought physically vis-a-vis what was posted on the portal and comparing, and if there are any discrepancies, notes being taken. But I would assume those 1,111 polling stations are in certain constituencies, and those are the reasons why the Forms 34B and the Forms 34A have not been uploaded on the portal. But we will pose that question to the commissioners, and maybe they will be able to give us an answer insofar as that question is concerned. Remember also, Trevor, if you're to look at all the results that will be tabulated, even if, let's say, some of those constituencies and some of those polling stations whose results have not been brought here, were not brought here at all, for one reason or the other, all that IEBC needs to do is to look at the results that have so far been verified and validated, and see whether the remainder of the constituencies and the remainder of the polling stations, the numbers therein would be so significant as to alter the final tally, and whether, even without necessarily looking at them, whether they would in any way affect the final declaration between the first candidate and the second candidate insofar as that list of the presidential election is concerned. So let's wait for IEBC commissioners to tell us what has happened. But from where I sit and from where I stand, the information we have is that all the forms have been able to arrive here. They were brought here by the relevant officers, the returning officers, and they have been verified and validated.
Hapo sawa Gashuri, wewe na Chebukati mko hivi, lakini nasikia kuna mwana bado anataka kukuuliza swali hapa.
Pengine Gashuri, tu kwa faida ya mtazamaji wetu, maanake umetuambia kwamba muda usiokuwa mrefu, pengine tunahesabu masaa tu, tutakuwa tumepata kujua ni nani ambaye atakabidhiwa cheti cha kuwa rais wa taifa hili. Sasa baada ya yule mshindi kutangazwa, pengine Wakenya watarajie nini? Ni hatua gani ambayo inastahili kufuata kisheria na kikatiba?
Bila shaka mshindi akishatangazwa leo Mwanahamisi, tuliona ile kamati ambayo inashughulikia swala nzima la kuchukua hatamu za uongozi kutoka kwa rais aliye sasa hadi rais ambaye atakuwa amechaguliwa. Wanaita Assumption to the Office of President Committee. Imeshaanza shughuli zake. Inasubiri tu tangazo la ni nani atakayekuwa mshindi katika kinyang'anyiro hiki cha urais. Na punde tu atakapotangazwa, na ikiwa kama atakuwa ameafiki yale matakwa ya katiba, yani awe amepata angalau 50% ya kura zote za urais zilizopigwa siku ya Jumanne na kura nyingine moja, na vile vile awe amepata angalau 25% ya kura zote za urais ambazo zilipigwa katika angalau kaunti 24, basi atakuwa ameafiki matakwa hayo. Na ikiwa hakuna yeyote ambaye atawasilisha rufaa katika mahakama ya juu, basi huyu ambaye atakuwa ametangazwa leo kama mshindi, basi shughuli nzima ya kumwapisha itang'oa nanga, ikiwemo shughuli za kamati ambayo inashughulikia swala hilo nzima, na kamati hiyo inaongozwa na mkuu wa utumishi wa umma Joseph Kinyua, na ina wanachama kadhaa ikiwemo mkuu wa majeshi, msajili mkuu wa mahakama, makatibu mbalimbali wa wizara husika ikiwemo ile wizara ya fedha, ikiwemo mkuu inspector general wa polisi na maafisa wengine ambao wanashughulika moja kwa moja na shughuli nzima ya kumwapisha rais. Na vile vile pia ukumbuke hata wizara ya mashauri ya kigeni inahusika katika kamati hiyo, kwa sababu inatarajiwa na ni mtindo kwamba hata kuna marais kutoka mataifa ya nje na wageni wengine waalikwa kutoka mataifa ya nje watakuwa wanafika hapa ili kushuhudia zoezi hilo la kumwapisha rais mpya. Lakini iwapo hakuna yeyote ambaye atakuwa amepata angalau 50% ya kura zote za urais ambazo zitakuwa zimepigwa, basi ule wa kwanza na wa pili watalazimika kurejea uwanjani kumenyana. Lakini vile vile kumbuka, kuna nafasi ya yule ambaye hatakuwa ameridhika na matokeo haya kuyawasilisha rufaa katika mahakama ya juu, yani Supreme Court, na muda huo ni wa siku 7 uko kwenye katiba, na mahakama ya juu itakuwa na siku 14 kusikiza na kuamua kesi hiyo na kubaini iwapo uchaguzi uliandaliwa kwa njia iliyo nzuri ama kulikuwa na dosari ambazo labda zimeafiki kiwango cha kusema ama kuagiza uchaguzi urejelewe tena kama ilivyofanyika mwaka 2017. Kwa hivyo matokeo yatakayotangazwa hapa na mwenyekiti wa IEBC Wafula Chebukati kutueleza ni nani aliyeshinda, ameshinda kwa kura ngapi, asilimia gani ya kura zote ambazo zimepigwa, basi tangazo hilo ndilo litakalofungua ukurasa wa matukio mengine ambayo yatafuata yanayohusiana na uchaguzi huu wa urais.
Sawa sawa, asante sana Gashuri. Turudi hapa studio angalau pia nimpatie mwenzangu Safin nafasi, na hakika pengine ana maswali kwa wageni wetu, lakini kabla sijawapokeza, maanake najua nikiwapa kizungu kitaanza kutiririka hapa. Pengine kwa upande wangu tu ningependa kujua, maanake tunaona uchaguzi huu katika historia ya taifa umechukua muda mrefu zaidi kabla ya matokeo kutangazwa, na wagombea kila mmoja anajipiga kifua akisema kwamba yeye ndio yuko mbele. Sasa pengine ushauri wenu kwa wale wananchi ama wafuasi wa hawa viongozi ambao kwa hivi sasa wana matarajio kwamba yule niliyempigia kura ndo atakuwa ni rais, iwapo hatachukua hatamu za uongozi, wafanyeje ili kuweza kudhibiti matarajio yao, mihemko yao, ili tuweze kudumisha amani ambayo inaonekana imedumu hadi wakati huu?
Asante sana kwa hilo swali. Cha kwanza kabisa, kila mrengo uko na utarajio wa ushindi, na tayari vile walikuwa wametueleza, walikuwa wameweka hizi fomu 34
zite tu
34
kwa mtandao ya IEBC. Sasa tayari kila mrengo inajua fasi penye wamekaa. Hata saa hii ukiona hiyo ukumbi ya Bomas, hatuoni ile pressure sana na ile tension ilikuweko hapo majuzi, kwa sababu sasa kila mrengo imejua penye wamekaa. Tayari sasa ni siku 2 ambayo kila mrengo ilikuwa inasema tuna ushindi. Sisi tushafanya hesabu zetu vile walikuwa wameweka hizo form, na hesabu zetu zinaonyesha tuko na ushindi. Sasa itakuwa jukumu ya kila kiongozi wa hiyo mrengo kueleza wafuasi wake vile wanafaa kusherekea ama kuhuzunika na yale utangazaji ambayo itatoka kwa ukumbi ya Bomas leo. Hatutaki kuingia kwa ile msimu wa watu kuingia kwa barabara kuchoma vitu ambazo sisi wenyewe ndio tumejenga. Pesa zimekuja mashinani kupitia ugatuzi, mabarabara zimejengwa, nini, hospitali mnaanza kuvunja. Kwa sababu kama mimi fasi yenye nimetoka, natoka county ambayo iko frontier county, na siku zote kama kuna cheche ya maneno kama hayo, yale kabila ambazo sio hasili kutoka hapo, ambao walikuja kufanya kazi na kuishi, na katiba imeambia kila Mkenya ana uhuru ya kufanya hiyo, siku zote wanakimbilia hiyo nchi jirani ya Uganda, na tayari mazungumzo kama hayo yameanza, na ni kitu ya kuhuzunisha sana, kuhofisha, kwa sababu watu wanafaa kukaa uhuru kwa nchi yao popote. Sitaki nikiingia kwa uchaguzi alafu waniambie vile uko kwenu hawakufanya vile sisi tulitaka, sasa na pia wewe ondoka hapa. Unaona? Hiyo sio vile tunataka kuishi, na itabidi kila kiongozi wa kila mrengo waambie wananchi, sisi ni watu ambao tunatii sheria. Kila mtu ana uhuru wa kuishi popote. Hakuna mtu kuondelea kwa makao yao ama biashara zao ziharibiwe, ama kuambiwa magari zenu hazitatembea hapa, ama kazi zenu hamtafanya kazi hapa, kwa sababu kila mtu anatafuta hiyo riziki. Na najua zile mashirika zisio za serikali na makanisa na viongozi wa Islamu wote walikuwa wamekabidhiwa hii message ya peace, na wao peke yao ndio wanaongea peace, lakini hatusikii wanasiasa wakiongea hii maneno ya peace. Na itakuwa muhimu kwamba pia viongozi wa kisiasa wanaongea juu ya amani. Tulinde hii ni nchi yetu, hakuna nchi nyingine, huku ndio kwetu. Ukiharibu utenda wapi? Sasa hiyo ni kitu ambacho tunataka kuanza kuona wanasiasa wanazungumzia, hata vile tunatarajia hii announcement.
Sasa pengine Bwana Ndubi, ukichangia tu katika hilo, tunaona kwamba IEBC imechukua muda wake mrefu polepole kuhakikisha kwamba kila kitu kiko sawa kabla ya kuweza kutangaza haya matokeo. Na hapo jana tulimwona Bwana Mwauri akikubali kwamba yeye huu uchaguzi ulikuwa si wake, yani amekubali matokeo kwamba ameshindwa. Je, katika hawa watatu ambao wamebakia, ambao kila mmoja ana nafasi yake pale, unaona kuna uwezekano pengine wa mmoja kukataa matokeo na kutaka kwenda kukata rufaa?
Yeyote yule akitaka kukataa ni hiari yake, lakini kwanza nakumbuka kwamba hiyo jana wale wawili ambao wanaongoza walikuwa kwenye maombi kanisani, na kila mmoja wao aliomba kwamba wananchi wakubali matokeo na wao vile vile watayakubali. Na naona kwamba wenyewe wanajua kwamba ridhaa ya wananchi au kuchaguliwa kwa wananchi ni utashi wa wananchi. Kwa hivyo kukataa au kutokataa ni kulingana na ile imani watu wanaweza kuwa nayo kwa utendakazi wa IEBC. Ikiwa tumeridhika na IEBC, hakuna sababu nyingine yoyote ya mtu kukataa matokeo. Lau hata ukikataa matokeo unaweza kukataa, lakini ufuate sheria, uende mahakamani, udhibitishe kuwa matokeo haya au vile ile kura imepiwa haikupiwa kulingana na utashi wa wananchi. Ni kama vile ilivyotokea mwaka wa 2017. Bwana Raila alienda kotini na akaonyesha na akadhibitisha kwa ushahidi kwamba kura haikupiwa kulingana na uwazi na watu kutilia maanani maadili ya upigaji kura. Ikiwa yeyote sasa yule ambaye labda hatashinda, akiwa anaona kwamba anahitaji kwenda kotini, ataenda kotini aonyeshe ushahidi huo. Kwa vile hiyo ndio sababu wanasiasa wanaruhusiwa kuwa na mawakala katika vituo vya upigaji kura, na hata Bomas of Kenya kudhibitisha vile ile coalition inafanywa. Ikiwa waridhiki, basi itakuwa ni mambo ni wao kuamua vile watataka kufanya.
Sawa sawa, pengine nikupokeze sasa Trevor, kabla nirejee wakati.
Au nataka kubatisha na Makori kama anaweza kuzungumza Kiswahili ama vipi?
Raundi ya pili itajibu raundi ya pili kwa Kiswahili.
To chapter 6,
yes.
Because I know that is where we're going. Danvers, maybe just in English. I know at the Commission you've been heavy on peace and tolerance during this electioneering period and even beyond, probably going forward on the same line of thought that my colleague has brought. How do you advise candidates change how do they interact with the electorate, even in terms of messaging, for us to sustain this peaceful coexistence that we are enjoying as a country right now? Not just the presidential candidates, but even the losers at the county and the other elective positions. How should they go about managing the expectations around this transition period?
I think first and foremost, I think it was Roosevelt who talked about the man in the arena. Remember that short poem he posited. And if you've been in the arena, first of all, I want to commend everybody who's vied, about 16,000, close to 16,200 people who vied. It is not easy to vie and to convince people to vote for you. And I don't think anybody has gotten absolutely zero. But the fact that you ran, it's not an easy in terms of emotion, but even just the financial burden to vie. It is tremendous. I've been in the political process myself. It's not an easy thing. So I want to commend them. They haven't so much lost. I would say they haven't won. And I want to put a spin to it. Our engagement to leaders in the past, when they signed our peace charter and political decency, as much as they signed it, you know what we were telling them? Every person who's running needs to have two speeches, a victory speech and a constitutional speech. You must. In Swahili, because our good friend is here, there's a saying that says, asikubali kushindwa, sio mshindani. You understand? You cannot run and just think you'll only win and that's the only outcome. And our admonition to both leaders from the highest level to the lowest, even MCs, when you engage them, especially in critical areas, we'll tell them you gotta have two speeches. And the winner has to be magnanimous and just say, you know what, I've won, but be gracious in your winning too. And one who has not won has to understand this is part of the process. Okay, you win some, you lose some. But it's not at the expense of the peace of the country. So to our leaders, that's what we engage in. Most of them actually signed up Political Decency Act. All political parties did, all 89 of them. There's another sense because we had the conference in KICC. Actually, 86 came, but the register told us there are 89 of them. So they signed the Political Decency Act, and we engaged them on that level. So we've seen a few incidences. Those who did not oblige to what they agreed to or stick to what they agreed to on the pledge. Very few incidences we've seen in the country, but for the most part, they've been decency. The flip side, what I would like to say to the Kenyan, I think, citizen, you see, peace begins with you. You know, peace begins with you and I. Okay, I don't have to wait for opposition to tell me to be peaceful. Okay, it's in my own self-interest, to be peaceful. That's my self-interest. It's your own self to be peaceful. So the Kenyan, they need to understand that's very critical before they're told by their politician or abide by peace. Because once I take responsibility upon myself to be peaceful, that's what, regardless of what happens, regardless of what the announcement comes in, they will be peaceful. Last but not least, this is a reality of a country. Whoever wins today, or even tomorrow, is still a Kenyan. Okay? And politics has a way, especially democracy, has a potential of dividing people. This is what we bestowed upon ourselves in 2010, this constitution. That's what we embraced as a country. But also, the reality is, it is a process of choosing the leaders. Then I have to see that we divide ourselves. It's just a process of choosing who we want to govern us for the next 5 years. The governors, I mean, I'm looking at the list here right now. Most governors' seats have been called, apart from the ones, 2 which are suspended. Senate seats have been called, MPs have been called. Pretty much most people know their leaders right now. I want to congratulate those who've been gracious enough to concede. It's a rightful thing. It's a mature thing to do. It's a right thing to do for a country. Now there'll be issues here and there of malpractice. Somebody, of course, as Mr. Ndubi has said, it's your rightful, you have a constitutional right to go to court. But how will that help our country? I don't think much. For me, given what IBC has done for the most part, they have learned the lessons. Even what your good friend was asking, when I say they have learned a lesson. That's why they've been meticulous this time. They've learned a lesson from 2017 of the Supreme Court ruling. That's why they've been very meticulous. So that now, for you to challenge, prior to this, you know what is funny? Prior to this, even winning a petition in court was very difficult. You can confirm that. The chance of winning a petition is like 5%. Now, given the measures they have put in place, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to convince the court that there was overwhelming evidence for them to overturn any election, be it an MCA or an MP seat or Senate seat or governor seat. So for me, we need to accept as a country, we move forward. We still have another 5 years to
Though there is something that has happened that I hear some returning officers have been arrested for participating in malpractice. That should be a basis to challenge an election.
Actually, POs.
Okay, yeah. But that it depends on how overwhelming
it is
the malpractice. Lakini I was going to say to quip to Mwanamisi wa Tanzania usema for the loser nilipigiwa kura lakini hazikutosha.
Lakini alipigiwa kura bado. That's true. Makori, I know before we get into the leadership and integrity chapter that we're about to talk about, I know NCIC was running a program. Was it called Elections Bill and Norma?
Yes.
What is the preliminary assessment of that? Because I've seen IPOA also mentioned that police are probing conduct of general elections. 2 men were shot and a woman assaulted.
Yes.
There was a rape incident. That is according to IPOA report, a shooting and serious injury incident in Wasingishu County. What is the preliminary assessment of election?
A number of isolated, what I call isolated incidents, and our list is slightly longer than that, because we have monitors pretty much across the country, and we coordinate with other CSOs, NGOs, and government agencies. So we have very, I'd say, isolated incidents, like Apo has mentioned. We have an issue in Narok that has come across. So that's why actually Narok could be called from Bomas rather than they were supposed to be, according to the law. We had it and we expected it. Let's put it in perspective. When you have 46,000 polling stations, 46,299 polling stations, you're bound to have 1 or 2 issues here and there. As Mr. Dubi has said, there are ABC officials who actually were arrested too because of issues here and there. In a nutshell, we've working with especially law enforcement because we are close with the police. I think we've seen, given the other previous, especially 2017, we've had a serious reduction on incidences, generally speaking, because I get reports every evening and every morning what has happened during the day, what happened during the night if there's incidences. If I look at my report that I came in today, it is like a 1-pager. Incidences here and there. Some of them not that serious, maybe like you said, somebody shot or something, not like fatal. We're still waiting to hear what happened to the IBC, the Arrow from Embakasi East. So of course, we have some serious issues, but generally speaking, in context, I want to commend the Kenyans for really choosing the way of peace, and even politicians for the most part. Well, 1 or 2 was mischievous to an extent. You expect that. You always have a naughty child in your family, you understand? But for the most part, they have been. Now, the critical part begins today, henceforth.
Yeah.
Because the history of our country, not much violence occurs right before or during, it's when it is announced. And we've put measures, we're in high alert, we're watching everything, we're in close communication with IBC to know when and when they'll announce so that we can activate the measures that be. And I think if I get a report from the ground, the feeling on the ground, because we have people on the ground across the country, the mood of the country is this. I don't think anybody really wants, as my sister was saying, I don't think anybody has a proclivity towards violence anymore. They're like, you know what, my pastor did not win, it is okay. But the issues, I can tell you, across the country, a few places I don't want to really mention so that, because we're still investigating, we are seeing preliminary issues across certain regions of the country. We're picking up intelligence that we know something might not be right, and we're trying to engage because we have measures we have on the ground to make sure there's peace in those regions that we are seeing some movement that is not really promising.
And the conduct of the National Police Service, because even Jakaya Kikwete, the East African Community Election Observation Mission from Tanzania, actually said that they performed exemplarily up until now.
Yes.
Because in certain cases, they were the ones who were aggrieving people. But now, what is your assessment based on the National Police Service?
The police, first of all, let me agree with General that statement. But, they had a training. No, in the previous election, the police didn't go through the training they have gone. There was the election management security training for the police commanders, and also the regular police or the officers themselves, they had a pocketbook on election. And for the most part, I know there were issues here and there. I've been an observer in places. There are issues, there are challenges. But when you have 150,000 security personnel deployed across the country, I mean, one or two issues will come. So I give them an A, given it. Now, I've engaged also with the IBC. We saw, actually, when that issue in Bomas was there, actually, I was there with the commissioners and really working on those issues that you see. And they were able to respond. The police understood their role. You know, by law, people understand, you know, Trevor, by law, according to the Election Act, any police officer, especially during election, and even in Bomas, is under the instruction of IBC. That is clear. It's very clear. So IBC says, we want this happens. And I know there was a challenge here and there, but I think for the most part, well and good, our police officers have done a phenomenal job. I want to commend them. Hopefully now we can even move further so that next time there will be even more reduced incidences that we have seen.
All right.
Yeah.
And now
They move from being a force to
a service. Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah.
That's good.
all right. Shall we talk about the
we
leadership?
shift gears now?
Yeah, okay.
All right. We just wanted also to look at the issue of Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity. I know this has been an issue for quite a while. Before we look at why it's becoming an issue to implement, maybe before the election, there was a bit of concern about the people who had presented themselves for different political seats. I believe to the later dates of the election, there was a list of those who were red-carded. We had also a sustained warning from the Interior CS, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, about allegations of a huge chunk of these political candidates probably bribing their way into parliament, questioning where they are drawing their campaign funds from. In the aftermath of the election, Cynthia, should we be concerned?
Absolutely, because we find that the institution that is managing the elections doesn't have the teeth to sanction candidates that they outrightly know have flaws, or they have red flags have come up in their conduct in previous offices that they have, public office that they have held, and that the IBC is not able to do anything but leave it to the courts or leave it to other institutions, the DCI and EACC, to do whatever they need to do. And so it is important that in the electoral laws that there be, the Parliament needs to delegate it to IBC, that IBC should actually make regulations that would be able to address some of these things and to empower the IBC to actually see that if red flags have come up in your characterization of other offices and responsibilities that you had, that then you're not qualified. It's the qualification of being in public office. And so IBC should be given that strength to actually admit people to be candidates and to sanction some. We have seen that they were not able to do that. And they left the drama to go on for so long. For example, for the Nairobi gubernatorial seat, where we now have the candidate as the victor, it went out for so long, and you have this conversation going on about people. It brings down people's character. It brings unnecessary tension and confusion, and we're like, oh, other forces the state is against me, and because I'm in opposition or I'm not towing the line for a certain person, this is coming up and there's just a witch hunt. But IBC should be able to outrightly just say, no, I'm sorry, this you're not able to qualify to run for this election because of this and this and this. And unless you go and find other reprieve, then we're not going to admit you into the election. So IBC needs to be strengthened. There needs to be legislation to strengthen IBC to be able to do that.
And Dubi, and what Safin is raising is very important. How come we've been unable to implement Chapter 6 of the Constitution? Because you mentioned earlier on that the solution doesn't even lie in the hopes and promises that everybody gives. It's in sticking to the Constitution. But this is one chapter that somehow has been very elusive. Nobody seems to know the heads and tails of it all.
The people who have betrayed Chapter 6 is both Parliament and the judiciary. Parliament, for the reason that we enacted the Leadership and Integrity Act. I was privileged to participate in consideration of the bill and being consulted to provide input. But when it went to Parliament, they watered it down completely. And indeed, even the Elections Act was also amended, or not amended, they amended the bill so that when it became an act of parliament, they said anybody who, even if you are charged or you are convicted, so long as there is an appeal, you will not be barred from contesting an election. That's why you have convicts like Weluke, because he has an appeal and is out on bail, pending the appeal, he's elected again. That's one. The second point was about the judiciary, why the judiciary is the greatest betrayer of this chapter 6. I recall in 2012 when what the people we called Uhuru and Ruto were trying to contest when we knew that they were charged at the ICC. Some civil society organizations went to court to seek to bar them from contesting, and a bench of 5, and I participated in the case a little bit, ruled that so long as they are not convicted, they are entitled to vie. So you have a situation where, and that's why Chebukati said he cannot bar anyone from contesting, even if they are convicted or even if they are suspects of crime, so long as there is no conviction, or if they have been convicted, if they have an appeal. So I think that that is really where the question lies. It's not even about strengthening the power of IEBC. And I wonder why IEBC demands that a candidate produces a certificate of good conduct and some clearance certificate from the KRA and anti-corruption, EACC, if it does not matter. So why do you ask for these things if they don't matter? Why is it that convicts are able to contest elections, but tax evaders are also contesting elections? About Matiang'i's allegations, it's actually baffling. Matiang'i said, yeah, there are people who engage in wash-wash business, there are fraudsters, there are, bribers. If Matiang'i is the head of the security network, he's the head of the police. I know under the law he cannot give the police directions as to what to do practically in terms of other than policy directions. He can't give them actual activity instructions. But I am sure in a conversation within the institution of the national security agencies, I'm sure he can influence the investigation, arrest, and prosecution of these people. So what we need is possibly an amendment to that law that permits convicts to contest, and indeed agree that, yes, we can amend the Elections Act or IEBC Act to allow them to reject candidates who are suspects. The problem, though, we have is that we hear rumors about people's corruption, and nothing has been done about them. There's no actual evidence. So you'll hear so-and-so engages in wash-wash, so-and-so is a corrupt person, he has stolen this or that, but you don't know, you have no evidence. So as a Kenyan, I feel a little negative that we have people we suspect to engage in irregularities or bad things, yet we allow them to contest. But again, our law is not strong enough to say, if you have these allegations about an individual, can you investigate them? So something like the NCIC should be able to have the power to investigate allegations, not just about hate speech, but investigate allegations about individuals who are likely, if the allegations are likely to result to a lack of cohesion in the country. But if you are waiting like the police that one must first report a crime for it to be investigated, then you have difficulty. People commit crimes and duck. Yeah. And, they obliterate the evidence against them. They bribe those people who are probably victims of that crime, or the crimes against the public generally. If nobody has an interest to go and report to the police, or if I come to the media and make an allegation about theft of public resources, the police will say, come and give us your statement.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have the hard evidence, but we need to have capacity to investigate information that we hear in the public. The National Intelligence Service ought to be able to provide whatever intelligence they have, especially around crime and around theft of public resources, so that the investigatory agencies can now, get the evidence from the NSIS, and then they use it to prosecute. But we see the police concentrating on not even investigating, punishing petty offenders. You find that what they call zoning of hotspots of crime, whether it's related to elections or other, they will tell you it's Mathare, it's Korogosho and other places. But some hotspots of crime are like in the Treasury, or in State House or Arambe House, and yet nobody provides the evidence to the public to know that actually the people who plan, especially corruption, which is budgeted, is done from the Treasury, is done from Parliament.
Okay. So, Makori, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, but as you can see on your screen, I think this is the clearest indication yet that this exercise is done. In fact, the center where the agents were seated have now been cleared. We've seen the tables being moved, we've seen the seats being moved, and now there's a higher number of people who've walked into the auditorium. Clearest indication yet that from 34C now, which is the total national tally of the results, is most likely about to be announced by the IEBC chairperson. We know that lastly when they spoke, 259 out of the 291 constituencies had already been checked, confirmed, and declared. Only 32 are remaining. And considering they were doing them in batches of 20, 30, it means there's just one more announcement and almost all the 32 should be done. But also, the people coming in, we're getting an update from Gashuri that this is a clear indication that the ceremonies before the declaration are in earnest. But Makori, why have we been unable to implement Chapter 6 in your view?
Two things. Yeah. First of all, let me dovetail from where Mr. Nubi has just finished by amplifying this. The Supreme Court ruling of 2012 by William Mutunga practically undermines the implementation of Chapter 6 as far as politics is concerned. It actually does. And it will be hard until that is overturned, that ruling. As far as politics is concerned, it will be almost impossible for us to have implementation, because that is a ruling of the Supreme Court. So no matter what law you enact, believe me, it will be overturned, because the High Court or the Appeal Court will say, well, we're having a ruling above us, this says this. Now, let us be real here. In the real world right now, this job that you got right now, Trevor, or we got even ourselves, as he has said, you have to supply your certificate of good conduct. And if you're convicted, you do not get that job. Your employer wouldn't say, well, until you've not exhausted all your appeals, then we employ you until. No. You are not simply, actually, leave alone convicted, even suspicion. If you're suspected, if there's a court case, and you're just a suspect, I don't think you're getting the job. It's just the reality.
May I just add something to your conversation? In the public service, the moment you are charged, you are interdicted.
Yeah.
But the politicians?
Yeah. And actually, that's my next point. There is a double standard. And I like that's actually my next point here. There's a double standard. I'm a state officer. There's a double standard. Because on our end, it is applied, believe you me. Yeah, it is. Like you said, the moment there's any issue, interdiction means the two up because it affects your work. So, and you're not even supposed to be in the office when we've seen such situations. So for me, there's a double standard of application of Chapter 6. It doesn't apply to the political class, but it applies to the public, a public servant, a state officer, because we are under it. I mean, there are few. The moment there's even just a hint of allegation, interdiction means as we've had. So there's a double standard in that. Now, how can we fix it? There's a clear way, because I don't want to put at the problem. There's two ways to fix it. Number one, there has to be, somebody needs to file another case so that it goes back to the Supreme Court to overturn the previous ruling of Justice Willy Mutunga, whereby until you've exhausted all your appeal processes, then you're bad. That doesn't even make any sense in terms of logical sense, practically how we live. Lastly, this is how we do it. To answer your question on Chapter 6, let's face it, this is the reality we live right now under that ruling. The first line of defense are the voters. Let me ask you a question, because I have a list of people who have been elected here on today's paper. How many of those people who are alleged to be part of that criminal enterprise or have been elected? How many? Practically almost all of them.
Yes.
And that is why I began by asking, should we be concerned? Because that warning came before Kenyans, took to the ballot.
Yeah.
And we are seeing the outcome of this election. But then let me ask you then, in this, you've given an example of a public servant and how it applies when you're being employed and you have something questionable about your character or integrity, it stops there. Yeah. But in this case, it's the voters who sort of are the employers in this equation. And if you look at the history of our country, if you're mentioned in a scandal, it's sort of like you gain popularity.
Of course.
I mean, it's sort of like that is when you start thriving in your political career. Who should we be looking at? Is it IEBC or the voters?
That's what I was going at.
Who should we blame?
See, that was my logic and argument was going that way.
Yeah.
It's simple. Who employs the politicians?
Yeah.
It's the Kenyans. So if somebody has a conviction already or is suspected to have proceeds of crime, or there's a court case, then logically speaking, you don't employ somebody like that in your house. If a house will come out, now they call house managers these days, if they come and they have that record, I don't think you let them take care of your children or in your house or trust them with your property. But people, Kenyans, willingly employ the people we've been talked about or alleged about. Simple. To me, it's very simple. And it's a conviction now as people, for us as the Kenyans. I'm going to ask a question to answer that question. Can good people elect bad leaders? And can bad people elect good leaders? And that's the answer to that question.
Absolutely. Let me just chip in a little bit on where he's going. Because I've been at the grassroots and I basically kind of know the psyche of the people. They feel that because usually when they are looking at a person to elect, they're like, Amesoma, Alisoma. And so if you have been interacting in these institutions and you've held a public office, and therefore no institution was able to bar you from contesting, then they're going to elect you. He brings to us. When he steals, it's for us, you see.
So you're like a Robin Hood.
Yeah, and so the voter actually encourages that. They say, we gave ourselves this constitution. In this constitution, we have these institutions. If these institutions do not see it necessary to bar this person from vying for this position, then who are we to stop the person, you see? So if they know that all these EACC, IEBC, whoever has cleared the person to vie, then they're going to give them the vote.
Yeah.
So if you are calling them thugs, drug dealers, wash people, that's the person he's been in a place of responsibility. We have seen how he has worked. He's very pragmatic. He's got all these teams running around because he's got all this money that he can facilitate all these teams to do the work. They don't care about the integrity.
Yeah, but
the institutions are supposed to have done that.
But there's also the flip side of it all, where we see politicians speaking about weaponization of corruption, where any time they're targeted, they go back to their community and say, you see, I'm the only one they're looking for because we are popular.
We're fighting for you.
Whether it's true or not, is as the judiciary also failed, the entire administrative system, as it failed in executing these issues fast enough and swiftly enough so that people can see these were the accusations, this is the evidence, and this is the outcome.
Before I get to that, I think there is a need to ask ourselves the question, what is the basis of corruption? And how has corruption shaped our politics, or how has our politics shaped corruption? From or prior to independence, during colonization and after, the economic model that we adopted and the economic structure that we have been having is such that the state or the government was this only source of, may I call it artificial wealth, because there are many forms of wealth. This is a source of money.
Hold that 1 minute. Let's cross over first of all to Bomas. There seems to be a bit of activity. I'll come back to you to finish the line of thought. Mwana, kuna nini kunaendelea huko?
Naam, sote tuko hapa lakini Gashuri ndio atakayezungumza.
Sasa ni nini sasa?
Ndio maana basi kwa hivi sasa moja kwa moja tunaungana na Gashuri, maanake kila mtu ana hamu, sio nyinyi tu ambao mnatutizama, hata sisi humu ndani tunataka kujua ni kipi ambacho kinaendelea katika ukumbi wa Bomas. Ndio maana basi nampokeza sasa Gashuri. Hebu tueleze, maanake tunaona watu wameanza kumiminika. Je, ni kipi ambacho kinafanyika kwa sasa?
Mwanahamisi na Kigamba yuko hapo karibu na wewe, na siku zote nasikia akipenda kusema dalili ya mvua ni mawingu, na swali ambalo ulikuwa umeniuliza hapo awali, tutarajie matangazo haya mwisho lini? Tutarajie tangazo la ni nani mshindi wa kinyang'anyiro cha urais itakuwa lini? Basi kitendawili hicho naona ni kama kimeanza kuteguliwa, kwa sababu ukiangalia pale katikati ya ukumbi huu wa Bomas ni mahali ambapo kwa takriban siku 5 pamekuwa ni eneo la shughuli chungu nzima. Trevor na wazungu wenzake watasema beehive of activity. Lakini sasa ukiangalia vile viti ambavyo vilikuwa pale, zile meza nyingi ambazo zilikuwa pale, wale mawakala na maafisa wa IEBC ambao walikuwa wameketi pale kufanya upekuzi wa stakabadhi ambazo zimetoka kutoka maeneo mbalimbali ambapo kura zilipigwa, sasa unaona wameshaondoka. Eneo hilo limeandaliwa upya na linaonyesha kila ishara kwamba kinyang'anyiro cha urais mwaka 2022 matokeo yake yanatangazwa katika muda usio mbali. Tuseme labda tulianzia siku, sasa ni saa, tuseme sasa ni dakika za kuhesabu shughuli hii nzima iweze kukamilika. Na linalofanyika pale ni kuandaa mahali ambapo sasa makamishna wa IEBC, mwenyekiti wa IEBC Wafula Chebukati na wenzake watakuwa wameketi ili kushughulika na swala nzima la kumkabidhi atakayekuwa mshindi ama atakayeibuka mshindi katika kinyang'anyiro cha urais cheti chake, cheti ambacho kitatumika kuanza mchakato mzima wa kumwapisha atakayekuwa ameteuliwa ama atakayekuwa amechaguliwa na kutangazwa kama rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, rais wa awamu ya 5. Hivyo basi watu wanazidi kumiminika hapa, na ni wale tu ambao wana stakabadhi ambazo zinawaruhusu kufika hapa katika ukumbi wa Bomas, na usalama umedhibitiwa vilivyo kutoka lango kuu la Bomas hadi kiingilio cha Bomas hapa. Usalama umedhibitiwa vilivyo, na ni wale tu ambao wana vyeti ambavyo vinawaruhusu kuwa hapa wanaoruhusiwa kuingia hapa, na wanaonyeshwa kila mtu mahali ambapo wanafaa kuketi. Vile viti ambavyo vilikuwa pale katikati, vile ambavyo vilikuwa vinatumika na mawakala na maafisa wa IEBC kufanya upekuzi wa stakabadhi, sasa viti hivyo vimeondolewa na vimetawanywa katika ukumbi huu wa Bomas ili kuongeza nafasi zaidi ya watu ambao watakuwa wanafika hapa ili wapate nafasi ama pahali pa kuketi. Hivyo basi inakupa taswira kamili ya hali ilivyo na kukupa wazo la kwamba shughuli hii nzima sasa inafika kikomo chake. Kumbuka kutoka siku ya Jumanne tumekesha hapa kutoka siku ya Jumatano, Alhamisi, Ijumaa, Jumamosi, Jumapili na leo Jumatatu. Kwa hivyo siku 6 nzima tumekuwa hapa. Kuna wale ambao walikuwa wanatoka tu hapa kidogo, wanaenda angalau wanapata usingizi saa 1 ama masaa 2 na kurejea hapa ili kuhakikisha kwamba shughuli hii inaendeshwa kwa usawa, kwa uhakika, na shughuli hii nzima sasa inafika ukingoni. Na tunavyoona sasa hata usafi unaona unaanza kufanywa pale. Mpiga picha wetu Agi anaweza kukuonyesha kwamba kuna usafi ambao unafanywa pale katikati ya ukumbi ili shughuli nzima ya kumpokeza cheti yule ambaye ni mshindi katika kinyang'anyiro hiki cha urais aweze kufika hapa. Na naamini kufikia sasa, kwa sababu yamesalia tu maeneo bunge 32 matokeo yake ya kutangazwa, zoezi la kwanza bila shaka litakuwa ni kutangaza matokeo hayo kutoka maeneo bunge 32, na kisha baadaye zoezi nzima la kuanza sasa kuandaa ile fomu 34 cha form 34C. Fomu hiyo ambayo inanakili matokeo yote ya kinyang'anyiro cha urais kutoka vituo vya kupigia kura 46,229 na vile maeneo bunge 290 pamoja na lile moja la wale ambao walipiga kura kutoka ugaibuni, ukipenda the diaspora constituency. Hivyo basi ni kusubiri tu, na punde tu tutakapopata taarifa zingine, bila shaka nitaweza kuwajulisha watazamaji wetu. Hivyo basi lao ni kutulia papa hapa katika runinga ya Citizen, watizame tu yote atakayokuwa akifanyika katika ukumbi wa Bomas. Iwapo hauna stakabadhi ambazo zinaweza kukuruhusu kufika hapa katika ukumbi wa Bomas, usipoteze muda wako kuja hapa kwa sababu hautaruhusiwa. La muhimu zaidi na rahisi zaidi ni kutulia hapo. Tazama runinga ya Citizen, pale vile Citizen Digital, uweze kuona yote ambayo yanafanyika katika ukumbi huu wa Bomas, kilele chake ikiwa ni kumpokeza cheti yule ambaye atakuwa ameshinda katika kinyang'anyiro cha urais. Mwanahamisi.
Na kabla sijaendelea, pengine Safini, ulikuwa una lipi ambalo unataka kumuuliza Gashuri upande ule?
Bila shaka Gashuri, kabla hujaondoka, pengine tukujua, let me now switch to what I know.
I was wondering how far that would happen.
I can actually hack it. But I just wanted to know, we are seeing evidently that the Bomas of Kenya is actually filling up. Have you been able to spot any familiar faces in terms of the agents of the political candidates? And of course, also earlier when you were speaking to us, you told us that results of about 32 constituencies have not been officially made public by IEBC. Have you also been told as to whether they'll start by announcing those results first, or any information on what is coming next from IEBC?
Safin, you had started very well. I hoped you would go on with the Kiswahili, but be it as it may, yes, we are told by the IEBC officers that what will happen first is the declaration of the 32 constituency results, just like has happened for all the other results from the other constituencies. The 259 so far that have had their results verified, validated, and declared here at the Bomas of Kenya. And thereafter, what will follow is the process of preparing the Form 34C. Remember, these a process of formulating these results. You know, these are results flow from the polling stations to the constituencies to the county and eventually to the National Tallying Center here at the Bomas of Kenya. And there's a reason for each of those places to have an opportunity to interact with the results. Remember, at the polling station, in 2017, it was declared by the highest court in the land that these, what we call the supremacy of the polling station, that the results that are declared at the polling station are, and that is why the Form 34A is processed. And thereafter, the Form 34A is posted to the portal and a copy taken also to the returning officer in the constituency. Remember, once the tabulation has been done by the returning officer at the constituency level, he or she also has to send the results on the portal and bring a physical copy to the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya. The county returning officers also have to interact with the presidential election results, because there is that constitutional requirement that the winning presidential candidate must get at least 25% in at least 24 counties, the total presidential votes cast. So it is also important for the returning officers at the county level to tell us whether which presidential candidate has met the 25% threshold in their county insofar as that constitutional requirement is concerned. And so what has been happening here at the Bomas of Kenya, Safin, is the verification and validation of those results. All of them have been verified and validated, all of them, the 291. So what has basically not happened yet is the declaration of the results from the 32 constituencies whose results have already been made here. But remember, no changes whatsoever are being made to the results that are coming from the polling station, because that is the declaration that was made by the court. And Harun Dubi is there, so he can give us the legal intricacies insofar as this process of tabulating and transmitting the results is concerned. So basically what is happening, I see quite a number of people have already made their way here. I have seen politicians, I've seen agents, I've seen various players across the political divide are here. I've seen Veronica Maina, the Secretary General of UDA, Gladys Boshole, who was one of the deputy chief agents, Earlier on, I saw Saitabao Ole Kanchori, who is the chief agent of the Azimio La Umoja One Kenya presidential candidate Raila Odinga. I also saw Paul, who is the chief legal advisor to Raila Odinga's presidential campaign. So quite a number of, I would say, familiar faces insofar as the presidential election is concerned. All of them here to just monitor the process and ensure that every process is, every step of the process is being followed insofar as what is outlined and what is expected of these kind of an exercise is concerned. So quite a number of them are here, all of them waiting to hear from the IEBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati, insofar as the final results are concerned. Remember, Safin, if you asked anyone here the last 3-4 days, each one of them was giving you their own results, telling you, we have tabulated, these are our numbers. And each of them was saying they have won. But eventually, the referee in this contest, Wafula Chebukati, will tell us who has won, who has not.
Gashuri, actually, it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's what I was about to ask you next. Because when initially the tabulation began, IEBC had 2 different screens. One would give the actual figures in terms of how many votes each has got after the official tally. Is that still up on the screen? Because yesterday, I think Commissioner Boya Molu was asked this, and he said that it was maybe just an IT issue and they were going to fix it. But is it up on the screen now?
I don't think it was an IT issue. I think it was more of a strategic issue, Trevor, if you ask me, because initially we could see the final tallies insofar as the results that were verified and validated were concerned. They would give those results by polling station. Like, for example, I remember at one point they had done 13,225 out of 46,229. That was early part of the morning. But since then, that was the last, posting that was on the main screens. Since then, nothing of the sort has happened. Actually, from where I am, right across me, I can see a screen, and all I can see are results that are being tabulated from the constituencies. Basically, more or less like what we are showing on Citizen TV. Once the results from the constituencies have been announced here at the have been announced here at the Bomas of Kenya and declared, the results that let's say, for example, like now, what I can see are results from one of the constituencies. Let me just walk across to tell you which constituency whose results is on the screen. It is actually Gishugu constituency. Is what is being shown on the screens here. But the total tally that was being shown earlier on, nothing of the sort is happening. So basically, just waiting to see whether they will actually decide to do that again or not, insofar as declaration of these results is concerned. So no final tally is being announced on the screens. They said it was an IT issue, but I think it was more of a strategic issue, if you ask me, Trevor.
Na Gashuri, pengine utueleze tu, manake kila mmoja macho yake yako kwenye runinga na tunaona vile watu wanavyozidi kumiminika hapo Bomas. Kuna ule mwingine ambaye anadhani pengine hata yeye anaweza kuruhusiwa kwenda pale kwenda kushuhudia hayo matokeo. Pengine kulingana na itifaki, ni kina nani ambao wanaruhusiwa kuja hapo kwa wakati huu, ikizingatiwa kwamba jana pia tuliona viongozi wa Azimio pale walikuwa wamewekewa vikwazo vya kuingia ndani. Je, leo mambo ni tofauti ama ni kama jana tu?
Mambo ni kama jana, lakini kuna tofauti kidogo, kwa sababu ukiangalia sasa katika ukumbi huu, nimeona sasa watu wengi zaidi wamemiminika hapa kuliko waliokuwa wamemiminika hapo jana. Na kuna sababu, kwa sababu Mwanahamisi, jana na juzi kulikuwa na shughuli nzima ya kukagua na kuhakiki matokeo ambayo yametoka kutoka maeneo bunge mbalimbali. Na unakumbuka kulikuwa na purukushani ambayo ilikuwa imeibuka, hali ya mshike, watu kuvutana hapa na pale, cheche za maneno, hata wakati mwingine nusra vurugu kuzuka. Na ndio sababu uamuzi ukachukuliwa na wale wasimamizi wa shughuli hii nzima, shughuli ambayo ya ukaguzi iliyokuwa ikiongozwa na kamishna Profesa Abdi Yakub Gulie. Wakasema kwamba wale tu ambao ni mawakala wakuu na wasimamizi wa uchaguzi kutoka, ama wasimamizi wa shughuli hii kutoka kwa wagombea urais wanne, ndio pekee waliokuwa wanaruhusiwa kufika hapa. Wengine wote ikiwemo wanasiasa walikuwa wanaagizwa kukaa huko nje na kukaa katika eneo la kando kabisa ya Bomas, ili kuhakikisha kwamba hawavurugi zoezi lenyewe. Lakini kwa sababu sasa zoezi limekamilika, wameanza kuruhusiwa, ilmradi tu uwe na cheti chako ambacho kinakuruhusu kuingia hapa, ukipenda accreditation. Na kulingana na itifaki ambazo ziko hapa, hiyo accreditation iko pia na kadi maalum ambayo unaitumia kubonyeza katika mlango wa Bomas ili mlango wenyewe unafunguka. Kwa hivyo kama kuna mtazamaji labda ana hamu sana ya kuja hapa katika ukumbi wa Bomas kutazama moja kwa moja yanayojiri, mimi ningemshauri tu asipoteze muda wake, kwa sababu bila cheti chenyewe hautaruhusiwa kwanza kuingia katika lango kuu la Bomas, na vile vile kuingia katika ukumbi huu hautaruhusiwa kufanya hivyo, kwa sababu ni wale tu ambao wana vyeti vya kuwaruhusu kufanya hivyo wanaoruhusiwa kuingia hapa. Lakini niseme wanasiasa mbalimbali wanazidi kuingia hapa, mawakala mbalimbali wanazidi kuingia hapa. Kwa hivyo zoezi linaendelea na lina utulivu fulani, tofauti na hali ilivyokuwa siku mbili zilizopita, kwa sababu kile ambacho kilikuwa kinaibua tumbo joto na hali ya mshike kimesha kamilika, yani ukaguzi wa stakabadhi. Hivyo basi linalosubiriwa tu ni matangazo ya matokeo ya mwisho, na ni matangazo ambayo hauwezi kuyavuruga ama hauwezi kubadilisha kwa chochote. Hata kama utakuwa unatofautiana nayo, afueni yako ni kuelekea tu mahakamani. Kwa hivyo watu wengi zaidi wamefika, lakini kuna utulivu fulani.
Sawa sawa, asante sana Gashuri. Mtazamaji, kama ulivyoona hapo, tumeonyeshwa kwamba kuna utulivu wa aina yake. Na Trevor na Safin, nafikiri nitasema huo utulivu pengine umeletwa na ile hali kwamba tayari mgombea urais ashajua ni nani. Manake sisi tuko hapa, wale wamekuwa wakifanya mahesabu yao, IBC imekuwa ikifanya mahesabu yao, lakini kama alivyosema Gashuri ni kwamba msema kweli atajulikana muda usokuwa mrefu. Kwa sasa
sema kweli ni IBC vile umesema, lakini mwanano najua mimi hapo vile ulisema itifaki zinafuatwa. Itifaki nikajua Kiswahili yote imeisha.
Na kingine sasa amesema hali ya tumbo joto haipo tena.
Bila shaka tumesubiri muda mrefu, lakini angalau mambo yaishe, mkondo mwingine uchukuliwe. Na tutakaporejea nitakuwa na swali moja tu, kama utanipa nafasi Trevor, ni waulize wageni wetu, lakini kwa sasa tunakwenda mapumzikoni kidogo tu kutoa nafasi kwa matangazo, kisha tutarejea. Usibanduki.
All right, thank you for staying with Citizen TV's wall-to-wall coverage of Kenya's Choice 2022. We're live at the Bomas of Kenya, where activity has switched from the verification now to preparations of the final declaration. We've not gotten confirmation of what time that is going to happen. Constitutionally, IEBC has until tomorrow to make the announcement, but we know so far they've already verified and confirmed tallies from 259 constituencies out of the 291, including the diaspora one, meaning now they only have 32 remaining, and they've been doing this in batches of about 30 or 20 of them. We're speaking to Francis Gashuri earlier on, telling us that the preparations, they have now shifted to the final ceremonies as the curtains come down to the Kenya's electioneering period that saw the lowest voter turnout ever. But also, let's cross over to the NCIC briefing. They have a press briefing right now. One of the commissioners is here, but let's listen to what they have to say.
Allow the process to ventilate any issues that may arise. We also like to call on the winner to be magnanimous and reach across the divide to make peace and forge a way forward. We ask for the run-up to be dignified and be treated with decorum. This also applies to the citizenry. Let us all be magnanimous and appreciate the pain we all feel when we lose. Let us not insult each other or gloat unnecessarily over the others. We are all one in one nation called Kenya. We must also recognize that Kenya achieved elections bila norma, which was our rallying call over the last year. It is through the efforts of many local and international partners that this was possible together with the people of Kenya. Following the same pace, we must now accept a presidential election results bila norma, just as we have seen multiple results being accepted and various leaders conceding defeat. It is this kind of acceptance that we need moving forward. Indeed, we commend every leader who has peacefully accepted defeat, as well as those who are seeking legal redress peacefully. We urge all of us to keep the peace and to remember that just as each vote counts, so that does each one's contribution count to keeping peace. We all are brothers and sisters, and Kenya needs us to remain so, no matter our political inclination. God bless you, and God bless Kenya. Thank you. That is the NCIC statement. We know that you are under pressure to go and do your work elsewhere, but if there is a question or two, we can entertain that before we close this conference. Okay, there being no question, thank you very much, and we wish you a good day, and we all stay calm and maintain peace as we await for the results of presidential elections whenever it is going to happen. Oh yes, there is a question, yes.
My name is Sharon from Ramogi. Just for a audience, can you repeat the same sorry? Briefly, just a summary of everything that you said.
Asante sana. Sisi tukiwa tume ya taifa ya uwiano na utangamano, tungependa kuambia wananchi ya kwamba tumefurahia kuona tulipiga kura vizuri kila pahali, na vile mambo yalivyo sasa, kumekuwa na utulivu na amani, na ni kwa sababu amani ni muhimu sana. Mpaka sasa tumeona kwamba kote katika nchi kumekuwa na amani, hata ingawa mahali hapa na pale kulikuwa na shida kidogo kulingana na miaka na elections zilipita. Mwaka huu wa 2022 elections tumeenda vizuri, na ni kwa sababu Wakenya wote wameamua kwamba vile tungependa ni amani. Tumeona kwamba kuna wakati mwingine kuna hasa in social media kuna zile tunaita fake news. Kuna wengi wale wamejaribu kutambaza news hapa na pale, lakini vile tungependa ni sisi wote wa Kenya tungoje mpaka tutasikia matokeo ya uchaguzi wa rais ukitangazwa na chairman wa IEBC Mr. Chebukati, kwa sababu ni yeye tu ana mamlaka kulingana na sheria kutangaza matokeo or results ya presidential election. Kwa hivyo yeye yule kukiwa kuna wengine wanasema mambo ya matokeo ya uchaguzi wa rais, tujue kwamba hao sio ambao wana mamlaka ya kusema hivyo. Pia tungependa kusema kwamba vile itatangazwa kama masaa 36 hivi, kwa sababu kulingana na katiba kesho Jumanne, ikiwa ni wiki moja kutoka wakati wa uchaguzi, kutakuwa na hii announcement, na tungependa kusema kwamba hiyo announcement tunajua inangojewa kwa hamu sana na Wakenya wote, lakini tungoje tukidumisha amani na tukiwa watulivu. Tujue kwamba yeyote atakuwa ndiye amechaguliwa na Wakenya kama rais wa 5 wa Kenya, sisi wote tukubali, kwa sababu huo ni uamuzi wa Wakenya wale wanapiga kura. Kwa hivyo tungependa kusema kwamba hiyo haitakuwa mwisho wa maisha yetu Kenya, na kwa hivyo tujue kwamba yule atakuwa rais wa 5 tumuunge mkono ili yeye aweze kuongoza nchi ya Kenya vilivyo. Kwa hivyo tungependa kuuliza Wakenya kwamba wakubali matokeo kulingana na vile yatatangazwa, ikiwa ni leo au lazima iwe ni kesho, kwa sababu hivyo ndivyo katiba inasema. Tungependa pia kuuliza yule atakuwa ndiye amefaulu awe mkarimu, kwa sababu ukarimu huo unatakikana. Yeye kama ile tunaita kwa kimombo awe magnanimous in his victory, na pia aweze kuita yule atakuwa ndiye run up, kwa sababu kutakuwa na yule ameshinda na yule amekuwa ndiye alikuwa karibu kushinda, ili waweze kufanya kazi pamoja. Na yule atashindwa pia tujue amefanya kazi nzuri sana, kwa sababu kulingana na vile tumeona matokeo ni kwamba ni almost 50-50. Kwa hivyo si kusema kweli ameshindwa, ni kwa vile lazima kutakuwa na mshindi moja. Tungependa pia kuuliza Wakenya wote, wananchi pia wawe wakarimu, kama vile tumeona kuna viongozi wengine ambao wamechaguliwa, na kwa mara ya kwanza wengi sana wale waligombea viti mbalimbali vikiwa vya governor au senator au member of parliament wamekubali, they have conceded defeat. Hiyo ni jambo la muhimu sana katika demokrasia, na tungependa kupongeza wale ambao wamekubali kushindwa, na tuseme kwamba tuendelee kwa njia hiyo hiyo, kwa sababu hiyo itadumisha demokrasia. Ya mwisho tumesema kwamba tumeona uchaguzi umeendelea kulingana na vile tukiwa NCIC tulisema tuwe na elections bila noma, uchaguzi bila noma, kwa sababu kama vile mnajua kwa mwaka umepita sisi tulikuwa na hiyo rallying call ya uchaguzi bila noma, na ni kwa sababu ya vile kumekuwa na cooperation katikati ya wengi sana katika nchi, lakini pamoja pia na wale international partners, vile tumekuwa na uchaguzi bila noma. Vile vile tungependa kuuliza Wakenya tudumize hiyo uchaguzi kama vile tulifanya kwa uchaguzi bila noma, ili tuwe na ile tunaita presidential election results bila noma, kwa sababu kukiwa na hiyo itaonyesha kwamba tumeanza kukomaa kidemokrasia, na ni wakati yule ambaye ameshindwa anakubali, hiyo ndio itaonyesha kwamba hata ikiwa hatukufaulu wakati huu, tutajaribu wakati mwingine, kwa sababu tunajua kuna wengi wanajaribu mara mingi na mwishowe wakashinda. Alafu tukimaliza, tumesema kwamba tukumbuke sisi wote katika kupiga kura, kila kura ya Mkenya yeyote ni ya muhimu, na tujue hiyo kwa sababu yule ya uchaguzi wa rais, yule atakuwa na 50% plus 1 vote, kura moja tu ni ya muhimu. Hiyo ndio tungependa kusema kwamba pia vile sisi tutadumiza amani, kila mmoja wetu vile atakuwa amekaa kwa amani, vile vile itakuwa ni ya muhimu, hata ikiwa ni ya mtu mmoja. Na kwa sababu hiyo itatusaidia tuendelee kuwa ndugu na ndanda katika nchi yetu. Asanteni sana, hiyo ndio imekuwa statement yetu. Okay, asanteni. Mungu aubariki kwa kazi yenu ya leo.
All right, just moments there after Reverend Samuel Kobios, the National Cohesion Integration Commission chairperson, made his remarks calling on the country to stay peaceful due to the process and ventilate the issues in the court of law. The winner to reach out to the other side as well, and most importantly, has emphasized on the treatment of each other with decorum. He's saying treat each other with respect, because at the end of the day, really, your neighbor is still your neighbor, your brother is still your brother, your sister is still your sister. And like they always say, the politicians up there are their own relatives and friends. You have nothing in common with them, and I can't emphasize that enough. You can easily call me, I'll pick your call. They will not pick your calls after this, so do not try to do anything unusual. Stay peaceful, all right, wherever the announcement is. And those are just moments from the announcement based on the rearrangement that we are seeing at the Bomas of Kenya. IBC has not said that they're making the announcement really. This is just based on the rearrangements that we are seeing. There's more deployment of the security officers, as you can see. The blue is now even more there in terms of the National Police Service officers having surrounded that area in between there. That is where the returning officers were during the verification process. We know there are only just 32 forms left before the end of this. And mwana sasa tunamalizia ama vipi?
Naam, kuna kitu kimoja ambacho nataka tuelewe kwamba hivi sasa macho yote yako katika ukumbi wa Bomas, na tunasubiri tangazo moja tu ambalo litabadilisha taifa. kwa mkondo tofauti. Lakini kuna swala moja ambalo nataka tulirudie nyuma, manake kuna hili swala la elimu. Watoto wetu wako nyumbani, masomo yameathirika kwa sababu ya uchaguzi. Tukishamaliza hapa, tukishamjua rais nani, ndo tutarudi sasa. Kuna wale wanafunzi ambao walikuwa wanafaa kufanya mtihani wameathirika, kuna wale wengine ambao walikuwa wanafaa kufanya mambo tofauti tofauti hawajayafanya. Nafikiri katika siku zijazo ama kwenda mbele, pengine tufanye jambo gani ili tunapokuwa katika uchaguzi usiweze kuathiri masomo ya wanafunzi, maanake hata kisaikolojia pia wao wanaathirika.
Tusisahau kwamba katika hali ya kawaida mwezi wa Agosti inakuanga holiday. Wako shule kwa sababu ya COVID. Hapo ndio shida ilikuwa. Ile kalenda sasa tuko shule nayo kwa sababu wali arrange, ndio maana ikuje zile time tuli lose mwaka moja wakati wa COVID tupate saa hii. Hii arrangement inafanya sasa watoto kwa shule saa hii na Agosti inakuanga holiday. Shule zimefungwa Agosti. Ndio maana uchaguzi pia inakuanga nini Agosti. Ndio maana shule zimefungwa. Hapo ndio shida ilikuwa. So kwenda mbele, I don't think tutakuwa na shida kwa sababu I think by mwisho wa hii mwaka tutarudia kalenda ile normal ile tulikuwa nayo, ambapo ni April, Agosti na December shule zimefungwa. Ndio hapo ndio shida ilitokea.
Na katika huu wito wa amani ambao unatolewa kila mahali, kuna sehemu ambazo tayari taharuki ishatanda.
Naam.
Taharuki imetanda, watu wanahofia kwamba iwapo kiongozi ambaye sijamchagua akiingia madarakani, sisi tutakuwa namna gani? Pengine kwa maoni yenu, mnadhani mkondo unastahili kuchukua namna gani?
Ni vizuri vile hii kipindi ambayo tumeona NCIC, naona chairman mwenyewe amechukua muda kwa kuzungumza juu ya amani.
Naam.
Na chenye inaonesha ni kwamba yeye pia amehofia kunaweza kuwa na machafuko ambayo inaweza kujitokeza kwa vile tutasikia matangazo. Kumbuka ya kwamba tumekuwa kwa runinga na tumekuwa kwa hizi social media ambao tumeona kwamba kulikuwa na dosari fulani. Na sasa hizi dosari ndio kila mwanasiasa aliona kuna dosari hapa. Na mimi sasa sitaendelea na kuanza kuongea juu, yani let the process, let it just take its course. Hakuna mwanasiasa ameanza kuhubiri amani kwa sababu aliona kuna dosari hapa, basi ulikuwa unageuza ushindi wangu na mimi ndio mshindi. Sasa tunatangaza ushindi wetu. Nyinyi mkitangaza tutatangaza, mkileta noma tunaleta noma, mkileta vita tutaleta vita. Mkiwa na amani basi kutakuwa na amani. Na sasa hii msimu ambao watoto wanafaa kurudia kwa shule, anazungumza juu ya COVID na huu mwaka mwezi wa 8 ndio inakuanga likizo. Kumbuka kwamba kuna kalenda. Kuna wale ambao wanaenda kufanya mtihani wao wa mwisho na nini. Wazazi wako na hofu sana. Nitawachilia aje mtoto wangu msichana aende boarding school, alafu kukizuka rabsha yoyote, kutakuwa na dhulma dhidi ya jinsia, hasa wa mama wasichana wadogo, kwa sababu watu hawachagui. Kama ni mbaya ni mbaya. Wasichana tumeona kwa nchi zingine ambao wamedhulma watoto mpaka wadogo sana. Tumeona hata vile tulikuwa na machafuko ya 2007. Mpaka tuzungumze hizi vitu. Sitaki kuificha kwa sababu saa hii tunaingia ile msimu ambayo iko so sensitive. So sensitive. Nafikiri vile wananchi wamepitia corona, vile watu tumeishi, vile watu walikuwa wanazungumza wenyewe, vile vijana wanazungumza, wanasema wanasiasa ni klasi nyingine, sisi ni wenyewe kwa wenyewe. Nyinyi watu tudumishe amani, tusipigane na jirani. Sisi wote tunatafuta riziki yetu pamoja, tunakaa pamoja. Lakini kuna wale vijana, kumbuka kwamba kulikuwa na ile msusumuko ambao kulikuwa na kila mrengo ilikuwa na msusumuko, kulikuwa na firimbi movement. Kabla ya kuenda kupiga hiyo kura, watu hawakulala. Watu walikesha na mangoma na hizo firimbi wakipiga. Watu tayari walikuwa washatoka. Sasa kuanza kuambia hebu mrudi kidogo tena tuzungumze. Tayari watu wametoka na wametoka na hizo firimbi, wametoka na hiyo shangwe na vigelegele. Watu wako tayari. And that is the mood. Watu wako hapo. Sasa watoto wetu watarudi aje kwa shule? Kama yani penye vile watatangaza ikianguka huku ama huku. Mimi nawezaje kuachilia msichana wangu aende boarding school Mombasa kutoka Busia? Sitaweza kufanya hivyo kwa sababu sijui hapa katikati ikifika Nakuru watashukishwa kwa basi, kila mtu wadhulumu msichana wangu, unaona. Sasa ni hali ya kusikitisha sana, kwa sababu vile tumeona hii uchaguzi, kila mtu amesema kulikuwa na dosari. Hata vile IEBC walikuwa wanajaribu kuongea, haikuwa inaingia kwa watu. Hata wakisema wamejaribu kuingia kwa kompyuta yetu, lakini sisi tumeikomesha na hawakuingia. Kila kitu iko shwari, chenye tunawapatia ni ya ukweli. Sasa itakuwa kuna kazi. Wacha niwachie tu hapo na
labda niongezee kitu kimoja. Ni kwamba mbali na uchaguzi tumekuwa nazo awali, katika uchaguzi huu tumeona wale waliopoteza viti vyao vya ubunge wakikubali. Hata MCAs wanakubali kwamba aliyeshinda ameshinda na mimi nimekubali matokeo. La pili ni kwamba waliojitokeza, idadi ya wapiga kura waliojitokeza kupiga kura ni kama 50% ama 52. Kwa hivyo wale wengine ambao hawakupiga hawana sababu ya kuwa na hisia ya kuleta mambo yoyote kwa sababu hawakupiga kura. La tatu ni kwamba kila mtu akienda kupiga kura najua kwamba kutakuwa na atakayeshinda na atakayekosa kushinda. Kwa hivyo kuhubiri juu ya amani kupitia kiasi vile nilivyoona mimi kunaleta ile hisia kwamba huenda kukatokea vita, ila wananchi wenyewe hawana hisia kama hiyo. Nakumbuka, of course, naelewa kwamba kwa sababu ya mambo yaliyotokea awali, hasa mwaka wa 2007 alafu 2017, ndio sababu taasisi kama ya NCIC wanakuwa na wasiwasi, ama makanisa wanakuwa na wasiwasi kwamba waje tuhubiri amani. Lakini cha muhimu kwenda mbele ni kwamba tukiwa na uchaguzi wa wazi ambao unafuata maadili ya kiwazi na wa ukweli, hakuna sababu yoyote ya kuhofia kwamba kunaweza kuwa na fujo. Naam.
Indeed, and as we bring this to a close now, just citing a good example, the Nairobi governor-elect Johnson Sakaja and Polycarp Igathe were close competitors. You've seen what is going on social media. Sakaja already has invited Igathe for coffee, and Kenyans are liking it and actually talking about them working together because they both had good ideas for the city of Nairobi. And we've seen other leaders conceding peacefully and actually congratulating their close competitors. But as I wrap up from my end, just citing something that Reverend Dr. Samuel Kobia talked about earlier, just building on what they've called elections bila norma. They say presidential results bila norma, because this is where all that we have built is going to be tested post the announcement by the IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati, how we are going to conduct ourselves as a country, as neighbors, as brothers, as sisters, is what is going to really bring to the fore how much mature we are politically. So two things here. Winners will celebrate, of course, but one thing is said, let's appreciate the pain people feel when they lose. Let's be sensitive to that as well. Even as we go about making remarks and celebrating, let's be sensitive to the fact that some may not be very happy, and how we are going to deal with that is actually going to inform how we are going to move on post whatever is going to happen today. It's not yet clear whether the IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati is going to make the announcement today, but vile wanasema palipo na moshi
Panamoto.
Yes. That mosh is what we are seeing from the Bomas of Kenya. So we anticipate that anything should be happening any minute from now.
Yeah. In fact, I'll give you a moment, just 1 minute each for closing remarks. Danvas, I'll start with you. To the Kenyans who are listening this morning.
Mine is a very short, the shortest closing remark you've ever had.
Yeah.
Kenya has won.
Okay. Cynthia?
Elections are ordained. By God, we've always had the renewal of leadership, and the leaders that come through that process are for that season. Right now, Kenya is at that season where the leader that is going to come through this is going to address what we're going through. Okay. That's all I need to say. As a mother, as a woman, I just want to encourage our patriarchal society to be sensitive to that we don't want to see that heightened gender-based violence to our women, to our children.
All right, Harun?
I'm encouraged and actually hopeful that there will be no gender-based violence, largely because we have seen for the first time a lot of women elected as MPs across the country. But to remind Kenyans that yesterday, both Ruto and Raila were in churches in Karen, from their homes in Karen, and their friends. They will dine together after the election. There is no need for us to fight. I think the pain of losing an election should be compared with the pain of losing a match for those who are Premier League or soccer enthusiasts. They know. You do not fight just because you lost a match.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. 5 hours straight. Cynthia Mutere, politics and governance expert, Harun Dubi, advocate of the High Court, and Danvas Makori, NCIC commissioner, for making time this morning. We're leaving you with pictures live coming from the Bomas of Kenya, where we're keeping an eye on the proceedings there. We know that there's only 32 more to go out of the 291 constituencies to be announced. They've seen a rearrangement of the sitting, probably showing that this is the end. The returning officers have cleared the floor, so this is probably the climax of it all. Unajua mwana nilikuwa natarajia kuwa matangazo yatafanyika zamu yetu leo, lakini ni kama Rashid Abdalla, Lulu Hassan ndio wenyewe watabati
wanaingia, lakini pia hatujui kama itakuwa ni wakati huo, ni kungoja, lakini kama alivyotuambia Gashuri ni kwamba ni wakati wowote kutoka sasa. Na kutoka kwangu mimi ningependa tu kusema kwamba mshindi atatangazwa hii leo, lakini uhalisia wa mambo, mshindi ni mimi na wewe ambaye tulijitokeza kwenda kupiga kura. Manake kama tusingepiga kura, angepatikana wapi mshindi? Naitwa Mwanahamisi Hamadi, kwa heri.
Uhalisia sio.
My name is Safina Chengauma. Have a good day.
Tumaliza na Kiswahili bwana.
Japo tuna tofauti,
kila moja wetu ana sauti. Stop the bus. Tuinuane,
ushirikiano wetu.
Tuinuane,
na ukaribu wetu. Maishani tuinuane.
Angalia tu vile kwangu kumekauka. Siri yako ni nini? Utamu wa chakula ni unga wa tuten. Ate unga ya tuten. Hii nayo ni gani? Hiyo ni ya chapati. Hii nayo hapa ya ugali. Na sasa hii nitanunua wapi? Inapatikana kwa duka zote humu nchini. Haya, Nenda kununua sai. Asante sana mama boy.
Your family's choice for maize meal and home baking flour. Unga wa 210.
Shabiki.com is all about jackpots, live games, casino, virtual games, weekly promotions, bet builder, bet share, and 24/7 customer service.
It's all about football, basketball, tennis, cricket, motorsport, and so much more.
It's all about the big wins, the big moments, and the big bonuses.
Shabiki.com is all about you, the fun. Kuwa Shabiki. Play now.
Strictly not for persons under the age of 18. Betting can be addictive. Shabiki.com is authorized and regulated by the BCLB. License number 416.
Nyosha shilingi zaidi na zaidi. Sasa unapata ofa juu ya ofa ya kuwa 100% data bonus leo. Alafu piga star 544 hash au tembelea My Safaricom app kununua bundle na kupata target yako. Safaricom is for you.
Experience Swiss-based education in the heart of Nairobi. With practical hands-on skills, we prepare you for the dynamic world of culinary arts and patisserie or international hospitality management. Travel the world and gain global work experience through our international placement network as you shape your career as the next global future leader in hospitality. Welcome to the Bomas International Hospitality College. August and September intake ongoing.
Ee Mungu nguvu yetu, ilete baraka kwetu. Haki iwe ngao na mlinzi, na tukae na undugu, amani na uhuru. Raha tupate na ustawi, tuungane mkono kwa upendo, tuwe jirani wema kwa kusaidiana na kuelewana.
Dial *860 *412# to get tuungane mkono.
Sasa, mimi ni Zuri kutoka Safaricom na niko hapa kukuchanua. Kaa macho. Safaricom upiga kutoka 0722 000 000 pekee. Ukipigiwa na namba nyingine, usipeane maelezo yako ya kibinafsi. Tuma namba ya mkora kwa 333 ili Safaricom ichukue hatua. Jichanue and take control.
Maishani tuinuane.
Swadakta mtazamaji, hayawi huwa hatimaye tumemla ng'ombe na sasa tumebakisha mkia, ikiwa hivi sasa shughuli zote zimefika ukingoni katika ukumbi wa Bomas.
Na bila shaka tunazungumzia ni nani atakayepewa wadhifa wa kisheria kuweza kuwa rais wa 5 wa Jamhuri ya Kenya. Ni nani ambaye ataweza kupewa wadhifa wa kisheria kuwa rais katika muhula wa 3 tangu Kenya ipate katiba mpya. Ni nani atakuwa rais wa pili tangia tupate katiba mpya. Ni baadhi ya maswali ambayo tunayazungumza na tunayatarajia kwamba labda siku hii ya leo huenda wa Kenya wakajua mbivu na mbichi Sam.
And so far 259 constituencies have been tallied. Are the Bomas of Kenya indeed verified? We're just waiting for the remaining 31 plus, of course, the one from the diaspora to be in a position to know the final tally. But also we know that different political campaigns have been saying that they are ahead. Very confusing, but of course we are expecting that IBC should, in the course of the day, make the final announcement and declaration if indeed there is a winner, bearing in mind that there are those requirements that you have to get at least 50% plus 1 vote. We'll be waiting to see if there's a candidate who has gotten to that threshold.
Na mtazamaji, karibu, hii ni Kenya's Choice 2022.
Na bila shaka chaguo la Mkenya, ikiwa Wakenya wote leo hii wanatarajia wapate kile ambacho kinaendelea. Kumbuka wanahabari wetu pia vile wapo sehemu tofauti hapa nchini Kenya kusubiri na kuweza kupata maoni ya wananchi kuhusiana na kusubiri kwao. Manake huenda ikawa leo, lakini kisheria pia huenda ikawa kesho.
Kwa hivyo, lakini ukiangalia katika mtandao kila mmoja anauliza, je, ni manjano ama ni samawati?
Bila shaka anayejua ni manjano ama samawati ni mpiga kura, lakini uamuzi huo uko mikononi mwa Wafula Chebukati.
All right, welcome as we take you through the next few hours of Kenya's Choice as we await the final declaration. But let's now cross over to the Bomas of Kenya, because we know that this morning the agents that were there, the officials that were there, cleared from the floor, meaning that the process of verification has already concluded. You can see that the police officers are the ones that are, of course, guarding that area. And of course, we'll be expecting that in the next few hours we should be seeing the leaders, some leaders getting to arrive at the Bomas of Kenya, awaiting that very important announcement.
Na kama ulivyozungumza Sam, nafikiri kwamba kwa idadi ya yale maeneo bunge ambayo yameweza kusalia, na ukiangalia jinsi ambavyo jana Sam Gituku watu walikuwa wanavyozisoma, kuna uwezekano kwamba labda huenda vikasomwa vyote kwa wakati mmoja, kwa sababu tuliona kwamba jana zinasomwa zaidi ya maeneo bunge 30 na kwa hiyo kwa wale waliobakia labda kwa mkupuo mmoja huenda wakamaliza na baadaye ikawa ni subiri za kusubiri, na kuna taratibu zingine za kisheria ambazo lazima zifanyike wakati mwenyekiti ashajua ni nani ambaye ameweza kupata kura nyingi. Kuna mawasiliano lazima yafanyike na idara za usalama, kuna mawasiliano lazima yafanyike kwa rais aliye madarakani, alafu mawasiliano yafanyike kwa rais mteule, na pia yafanyike kwa yule ambaye haja. Kwa hiyo nafikiri kuna shughuli zitakuwa zinaendelea kabla tuone yale matangazo yakifanyika. Labda shughuli zile zitakuwa zinatoa mwelekeo labda pengine wapi kiti kinaenda, lakini pia wanazifanya kwa usiri zaidi, kumaanisha hakuna mtu ambaye atajua nini kinaendelea.
Lakini hadi kufikia sasa natumai kwamba rais anajua nani atakuwa rais.
Rais Kenyatta.
Anajua nani atakuwa rais, manake lazima mawasiliano yameshafanyika hadi wakati huu.
Lakini kama zile form bado zinafanywa kazi
34
even though Lulu, he would know obviously because he has access to a lot of sources of information, but also the law requires that the chairman of IEBC is able to, after the process of tallying verification, to announce and declare the president, and also present the certificate of election and the information to the Supreme Court, so that they can prepare for any eventuality, just in case there is a petition at the Supreme Court. So ordinarily, the law requires a communication to the, of course, the president-elect, and I would imagine also the other leaders who don't win that election, including all the presidential candidates, and also specific to the Chief Justice. For the president, it's not a requirement for IBC chairman to do that, but he would know anyway.
Na bila shaka ni baadhi tu ya maswala ambayo tunakuwa tunayatarajia kwamba huenda yakafanyika katika siku hii ya leo. Na ukiangalia pia viongozi wengi Sam Gituku na Lulu, ni kwamba tumeona wakiingia katika ukumbi wa Bomas kutoka mirengo yote ya kisiasa. Kuna wale ambao ni wateule na kuna wale ambao pia hawakuchaguliwa, lakini wote wamekuja, kumaanisha kwamba matokeo katika siku hii ya leo yatakuwa ni muhimu sana kwa upande wote wa kisiasa. na pia itakuwa ni muhimu sana kwa taifa hili la Kenya. Kwa ukiona sura nyingi ambazo ziko pale ni mchanganyiko, walioteuliwa ambao hakuteuliwa kutoka kambi zote za kisiasa.
Very important, especially because this is something that happens every 5 years, and so even as the announcement is being made, every leader, especially those that have been elected, those that are participating in this year's election, it will be important for them to witness history, and has been the case even in 2017, 2013.
Na hapo awali Trevor na Mwanahamisi waliweza kusema kwamba kutoka ukumbi wa Bomas ni kwamba waliweza kubaini form 23 za 34A bado hazijulikani mahali zipo mpaka kwa hivi sasa, na katika portal ile IEBC kuna form 34A ambazo ni